Post-Apocalyptic black technology battleship system. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176 Bincheng. Chapter 177 Bincheng. Bincheng is a sub-provincial city in Liao Province. It is located at the southern end of the Liaodong Peninsula and on the coast of the Yellow and Bohai Sea. Before the end of the world, it was once an important economic, trade, port, industrial and tourist city on the eastern coast of China Point, but now, this place has become a city of disaster. Xia Bai's battleship was traveling through the sky point at this time. The sky was getting dark, dusk was fading in the distant sky, and the last ray of light was about to be swallowed up by the night point. Looking from this position, the entire Bincheng is surrounded by a glow and thick smoke point. The military mainly uses incendiary bombs, white phosphorus bombs and even cloud bombs here. This is the most effective method known to combat mutant viruses, but it will also cause unimaginable damage to existing cities. Despite this, Bincheng still exists in the frontline defense zone. This time the nuclear bomb falls, this place will become a white ground, and a large semi-vacuum area will appear on the old Bincheng defense line. We are getting closer to the coordinate position. This is the message from Li Jingjiang. The warships are passing through in front, and the drones are flying at a lower altitude. Just now, they have just been with a force withdrawing from the ice city. Passing by, we are expected to fly over Bincheng in 1 minute. It was a scarred armored force that withdrew from the front line of Bincheng without hesitation and retreated in a direction away from the city point. They will establish a new line of defense at the boundary affected by a theoretical nuclear strike and shoulder the important task of secondary clearance after the nuclear strike and resisting the next batch of zombies. At this moment, it is 5:53. The nuclear weapons will be launched on time at 7:30 tonight point. Although Li Jianbai said that he had 2 hours, he had to put aside the matters he negotiated with Xia Bai. The preparation time before Xia Bai's departure, although it took less than 10 minutes for the battleship to arrive from Anyang Mountain, left. Xia Bai didn't have 2 hours left point. This is the first time that Xia Bai and the others have been dispatched in full in the past month since they came to Anyang Mountain. Among the battleships, although Xia Bai said he was calling everyone, he actually didn't bring many people. He only brought Bailan, Chen Xiancheng, Li Jingjiang, etc. Several people were brought along. They were core members of the Xia Bai battleship and could play an important role at critical moments. In addition to them, 2 awakened ones, Yi Haniu and Kyo Deming, were also present. With the Xia Bai battleship in hand in the tractor beam tower, land combat was unlikely, so there was no need to bring so many people point. And if they want to get off the battleship and face the extreme mutants spawned by the mutant virus, a few awakened people are more useful than many ordinary people point. Bincheng is a dangerous place right now. It is full of extreme mutants spawned by mutant viruses. Even the military has to abandon this city. Although his battleships are powerful, they are still incomparable to the military's large armored forces. Sexual point. Therefore, not only nuclear bombs, Bincheng itself is a terrifying and dangerous place point. For this reason, Yang Xin also wanted to follow, but was directly rejected by Xia Bai. The internal space of Xia Bai's battleship was not large, and the people he brought must be useful and capable of fighting. Between these 2 points, in addition, he also needs to leave space to place the key things Li Jianbai mentioned, and even other survivors. Therefore, there are only 6 people on Xia Bai's side, including Xia Bai himself point. At the moment, almost everyone is preparing for war. Before Xia Bai set off, he had already briefly discussed the situation. This time, everyone had a certain understanding of the situation and risks they were about to face, and they were all willing to take this risk with Xia Bai. Otherwise, Xia Bai would not let them board the battleship point. Bincheng was in sight, and Xia Bai confirmed the content of the message sent by Li Jianbai for the last time point. The object that the scientific research center identified as related to alien creatures was a metal object weighing 1 ton, and the top tactical team codenamed Dawn that came to retrieve the object earlier was a special force among the special forces. This team consisting of 12 people, and 2 collaborative teams arrived at the designated area, Bincheng Port, about 10 hours ago. They obtained the designated items here and retreated. About 3 hours ago, the communication system was interrupted, but through the last wave of timely information sent back by the positioning system they carried, it could be concluded that they were south of Bincheng Port, in a construction site adjacent to the central hospital. Xia Bai means that these teams can be sacrificed, but the things must be brought back. This may be a bit cruel, and it may make people feel uncomfortable, but Xia Bai understands that Xia Bai is doing the right thing. No one in this world who makes choices is a saint, but they are all great people. Xia Bai still respected and admired Mr. Li. Bincheng is already in sight. The city in the dusk light and shadow is like a dream, and the thick smoke rising from a distance also has a sad and beautiful meaning of the end of the world. However, Xia Bai stood up from the driver's seat. He asked Chen Shai and Cheng to control the battleship while he was in front of everyone. Alpha can actually control the battleship, achieving unmanned driving in a sense, but its intelligence is not high. His judgment in dealing with emergencies is poor, which is fine in an ordinary environment, but Xia Bai is still uneasy in Bincheng Point. But Alpha can assist humans in dangerous instant emergency responses, handle certain situations that humans cannot respond to immediately, and can greatly improve the adaptability of human drivers. To be honest, it has been a long time since Chen Shai and Cheng held the control stick of the battleship. But now he is different from before. In addition to being excited, he is more calm and calm. As Xia Bai stood up and faced everyone, the people behind him all fell silent and looked at Xia Bai in front. Yi Hanyu was also looking at Xia Bai in front of her, keeping silent and quiet. Although she seemed very nonsensical, she always knew what was going on and would never cause trouble to anyone at a critical moment. In other words, no one is more afraid of the death and irreversible consequences of her companions than she is. Xia Bai's eyes swept across everyone's faces, and he was silent for about a second before saying, "Everyone should also know that, although I own such a battleship, I'm not a soldier. And you are not military personnel either. But today, what we are about to conduct is a very important military operation. I have already said what the situation is in Bincheng and what the risks are. This time, we are here to assist the military in rescuing a group of military personnel and taking them away from the army of extreme mutants. A key item, I must say, is that our operation time is only 1 hour at most, because a nuclear bomb will fall on this city in 1.5 hours at most. That is to say, we have to find the designated relevant personnel within an hour and bring them to the battleship. If the opponent's location is open and conditions permit, we can rely solely on the battleship to bring the people up. But if the situation is not what we imagined, so optimistic, we are likely to have to fight on the ground. This is the specific situation. I hope you can support each other and carry out this operation smoothly. Please make your first order. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please collect it. Chapter 177 Rambler. Chapter 178 Rambler. Xia Bai's battleship was passing through the sky point in the distant sky. The dark red sunset has fallen to the end of the sky point. The entire city was dyed a dim blood red by this light point. And in such a world, Xia Bai saw an incredible and huge creature. At that time, he drove the warship from the end of the sky and entered the city limits of Bincheng. When he saw the creature, it was something like a collection of mud and sarcoma. The whole body was a disgusting scarlet color, but it was extremely huge. Half of the body was under the sea, and the remaining half landed on the ground, like chewing gum. The same thing spread throughout the urban area of Bincheng, turning a small half of Bincheng into a bloody city. Xia Bai didn't say there was such a thing here. In other corners of the city, some weird and huge extreme mutants are running rampant everywhere. They are all mutated creatures spawned by mutant viruses. Because many of them come from under the ocean, it is not surprising that they are weird. This once beautiful coastal city has long been riddled with holes and is now full of murderous intent. Monsters were running rampant in the city, roaring like carnivalesque, but they were also running, avoiding the giant plasticine-like creature that was slowly crawling and rolling up from under the ocean. That thing obviously doesn't distinguish between friend and foe, and all the organic matter it encounters along the way is swept into its body and becomes a part of it. As it squirms and advances, it is getting bigger and bigger. The entire city's army was retreating, and Xia Bai didn't see any sky units, except himself. Xia Bai thought in her heart, damn it, there is such a thing here, Xia Bai, and you didn't tell me. Xia Bai looked at this thing that almost covered the entire coastal area of Bincheng from the sky, and there was always a feeling in his heart that he had been deceived. But now that he is here, he will not retreat, and from a certain point of view, he is not here for Xia Bai's request. If the key thing here is really related to alien creatures, we need to first figure out what it is, and what its connection is with alien creatures. However, Xia Bai is not without reinforcement. According to Xia Bai, a group of troops are on standby in Zhangcheng district. They have given up the opportunity to evacuate before the nuclear bomb, and will fully cooperate with Xia Bai's actions. As long as Xia Bai upon arriving at the designated location, they will activate reinforcement as soon as possible to assist Xia Bai in completing the mission. The location of this group of troops on standby was in an underground parking lot in Zhangcheng district. When Xia Bai's battleship arrived, the place was also under attack from extremely mutated creatures. 5 or 6 Type 3 infected bodies gathered outside the underground parking lot and were rushing inside. Xia Bai originally wanted directional air support, but with his arrival, the military personnel below also took action immediately. They directly fired out of the underground parking lot with powerful firepower. 3 heavy tanks opened the way, followed closely by a row of armored vehicles. Under the combined firepower, the Type 3 infected bodies were instantly blown to pieces, but just like the Type 3 infected bodies that Xia Bai had seen before, even if these things were blown beyond recognition, they were still slowly dying, growing as if it could never be killed. The military convoy moved forward along the street, passing through the thick smoke that billowed in the city. The military has been entangled with these creatures here for a long time. The entire city is a battlefield, and now the place is filled with smoke. But when Xia Bai looked at the military convoy below, he felt mixed emotions. Xia Bai said there were reinforcement, but Xia Bai never expected that so many people from the military would stay here. 3 tanks, 7 armored vehicles, and at least 50 people. If they stay here, no matter whether their actions succeed or fail, they are almost certain to die. But they still had no complaints and stayed at the designated position. As soon as Xia Bai's warship arrived, they set off immediately and rushed to the battlefield of death without hesitation. Xia Bai heard Chen Shai and Cheng mutter, "Are these people crazy?" Short range communications were quickly connected, and the voice of the convoy commander below sounded among the battleships. "I am Hu Jianming, the military leader of this operation. On behalf of my ministry, I would like to thank you for coming. We will fully cooperate with your actions, with the primary goal of obtaining back item number 1 foot, at all costs. I will now report to you the current situation. 5 minutes ago, we have determined the current location of the Dawn team through drones and land robots. They have retreated from the new Sanhua construction site into Bengcheng Central Hospital, and are with other straight line distances about 2000 meters, and the distance to the Wanderer is about 200 meters. It is being besieged by a large number of Type 3 infected bodies, and is in urgent need of reinforcement. Item number 1 is obviously the target of their operation this time. It is the exact code name of the key item mentioned by Xia Bai on the military side. And the Rambler. I am here for reinforcement from the Shengjing survivor base. Xia Bai raised his head and looked at the red sarcoma that was constantly devouring the city displayed on the screen on the side of the battleship, and said, "Is that big thing the Rambler?" "I am Hu Jianming, the military leader of this operation. That is a Type 3 infected body, codenamed Rambler. It is recommended that you do not attack it. The virus it carries is a complete Type 3 mutant virus. With the firepower we currently have, we cannot cause any real damage to it. A traumatic blow and a hasty attack may lead to unnecessary counterattacks. Please resolutely implement the target plan." Xia Bai nodded, and he continued to raise the height of the battleship, taking the first step in midair, heading straight to the direction of the central hospital that he had marked on the battleship. The military convoy was still passing through the lanes, rushing towards the central hospital. Xia Bai's battleship was so fast that it didn't take long to cover a distance of about 2000 meters. However, when he came here, He realized that the situation here was worse than he imagined. The central hospital is adjacent to a construction site under construction. Most of the construction site has been completed, and the main building is almost completed. Of course, after the apocalypse, the bad condition of Bincheng directly made this place equally bad. The construction site and the building of the central hospital, the main body is scarred. But this is not the most critical thing. The most critical thing is, Xia Bai looked at the things flying around the construction site and the central hospital in the picture ahead, and murmured, "Is that a flying fish?" At the same moment, the setting sun on the horizon completely set, and the bloody afterglow covering the world disappeared, and the world was completely swallowed up by boundless darkness. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please support. Chapter 178. Chapter 179. Flying fish. Before the end of the world, Bincheng was one of the most developed cities along the coast of the 3 eastern provinces, but after the end of the world, it became a city of war. All kinds of strange creatures land here. Their lethality and vitality are far greater than ordinary zombies, and the viruses they carry are variants of the original alien viruses. A human military has set up an indestructible human defense line here, using the city as a battlefield, fighting to the death throughout the city. Therefore, even after the end of the world, the scene in this city is different from other cities. This city is riddled with smoke and flames, with scorch marks and bullet holes everywhere. Moreover, in order to target the Type 3 here infected bodies, the military used a large number of cloud bombs and white phosphorus bombs here, making the whole city look like a patient with severe burns. A nuclear strike is the military's last and final measure, but the consequences of a nuclear strike are unimaginable. The entire city will be wiped out, and radiation will make this area a death place for humans. Ultra high temperature and strong radiation will kill all living bodies in the city, but this will not stop the zombies. The military still has to open a line of defense behind it, to pay a greater price, to fill the gap created by itself. Xia Bai guessed that the reason why the military used nuclear weapons was probably related to the Rambler, but he had not yet confronted the Rambler, and could not imagine how powerful that thing was, so that it could be solved when the military had to use nuclear bombs. However, at this moment, Xia Bai was trapped in another matter. He saw a group of flying fish. Judging from the appearance, this thing is very similar to that kind of fish called flying fish, but it can't fly. I don't know how many times it has expanded compared to that kind of flying fish. It is now about the size of an SUV, and its wing-like fins have also become. They have real wings that can blow up strong winds to support their flight. The bodies of these things appeared dark red, the structure of their teeth became similar to that of sharks, and their eyes turned completely dark red. In the night, the battleship's lighting reflected a sharp cold light. And what appears here at this moment is not just one, but a group of them. These things seem to regard the riddled construction site building as their own nest, flying around, in and out. Xia Bai used the battleship to make a simple and inaccurate count. The number of these flying fish exceeded 20. Dancing gracefully in the darkness only gives people panic. At this moment, Xia Bai finally knew why Team Liming had to withdraw from here to the hospital. As the military retreated and began to completely abandon the city, it seemed like spring had arrived for these extreme mutants that had been suppressed for a long time. Down below, in the direction of the hospital, there are also many bizarre extreme mutants that are launching attacks on the hospital. As soon as the Xia Bai warship arrived, it was discovered by these flying fish. The first one let out a heart-stopping howl in midair, and then rushed up whistling with its wings fluttering. This thing flew faster than Xia Bai imagined, and arrived in front of Xia Bai's battleship almost in an instant. However, in Xia Bai's opinion, this was completely seeking death. The front of the battleship is a 380mm caliber main gun. The main gun is semi-embedded in the main body of the battleship. If you want to turn the muzzle of the main gun, you need to turn the body of the battleship. I didn't expect this thing to be. He greeted himself. Xia Bai, who had already taken his place on the weapon operating platform, of course fired without hesitation. From the outside, when the shot went down, the monster seemed to be coming towards him. It was blown to pieces in midair. Blood was scattered all over the sky, and its internal organs were torn to pieces. There were continuous sounds in midair. Before he even had time to cry out, his body fell heavily downwards turning into a large puddle of rotten flesh that landed on the ground below. However, what is astonishing is that despite this thing was completely blown away, but it was still not dead. After it fell to the ground, the large pool of flesh and blood was still squirming and growing. But at this moment, a spider-like monster rushed out from the other corner. It stretched out a mosquito-like mouthpit and penetrated directly into the living flesh and blood, sucking it frantically. Spreading flesh and blood is like enjoying the finest delicacies. Xia Bai only glanced at it and then zoomed out and pulled the picture from below to one side. In the last stage of his previous life, Xia Bai had never seen this kind of thing. Only in this life did he understand that the military had been stubbornly intercepted this creature that was far more terrifying than ordinary zombies. However, Xia Bai couldn't help but have a doubt. Why does this type 3 virus variant only appear in the ocean? But now is obviously not the time to think about this kind of problem, because as the first monster was killed by Xia Bai in the direction of the construction site over there, extreme mutants turned their heads one after another, their dark red eyes locked directly in this direction. They let out high-pitched howls to each other, and then they flew out of the many gaps and holes in the building and densely packed in the air towards Xia Bai's location. High-pitched howls one after another. Xia Bai did not show any weakness, and the battleships opened fire along the entire line. When the battleship reaches the 4th level, there is also a fire control auxiliary function on the weapon operating platform. For high-speed moving objects, it can provide certain attack aiming assistance and locate the instantaneous position for attack point. But there were too many of these things and they moved very fast. Xia Bai opened fire at once and knocked down about 5 monsters, but the rest had already jumped in front of the battleship. Under Chen Xianqing's control, the battleship suddenly took off, and those extreme mutants were also closely attached to the back of the battleship. The leading one even hit the battleship's shield. Warn. The shield is under impact. The thing was not afraid of life or death and felt no pain. It loaded one end up and rushed forward with all its strength against the electromagnetic shield. The entire head was scorched in the air, and it fell down in the air. While the battleship was climbing up, it was firing fiercely. The numerous weapon platforms suddenly brightened up when they fired salvos in the dark night, shining particularly brightly in the night sky. With the firepower and defense of the battleship, it is not a problem to deal with these extreme mutants. It just takes time. On the other side, above the ground, far away from here, the military's armored troops were rumbling across the ground and rushing towards this side at high speed. Under the central hospital, in the darkness, terrifying creatures were walking across the earth, charging towards them one by one, howling alarmingly in the dark night. And in the central hospital, gunshots were fired one after another, and they were struggling to resist the impact of these extreme mutants. Chapter 179 Desperate Situation. Chapter 180 Desperate Situation. Corridor on the 7th floor of Bincheng Central Hospital. Liu Bei was leaning against the wall and panting. In the corridor at the other end of her, a huge shadow was moving forward in the corridor, but its legs seemed to be interrupted. It was walking slowly, but it was not breathing. Only the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor. It echoed coldly in the air. While she was loading the grenade launcher in her hand neatly, she raised her head and looked out the window. From her angle, she could just see Xia Bai's battleship rising into the sky with a group of flying fish following it. Is that military reinforcement? Liu Bei gritted his teeth and held the gun tightly in his hand. Listening to the heavy footsteps of the monster behind him, he slowly calmed down his breathing to calm down. Regardless of whether it was military reinforcement or not, she had to deal with her own immediate troubles first. At the next moment, Liu Bei rushed out from behind, holding out a tactical grenade. But she didn't know if it was a coincidence, but her grenade missed the target and landed in the corner of the wall with a loud noise. One wall was blasted through, revealing the scenery outside the building. This time, the explosion not only did not harm the huge shadow, but instead aroused its ferocity. The thing let out a terrifying howl, and its huge body slided to the ground like a tank. As for this piece of V, Liu Bei didn't even dodge, and directly faced it head on with the gun in his hand. At the moment when the two collided head on, Liu Bei suddenly raised the muzzle of his gun, and a grenade exploded, hitting the side of the monster's body, knocking its body slightly to the side. revealing a gap point, and it was precisely because of this opportunity that Xia Bai took advantage of his tall and slender body to pass through the gap, came behind the monster, ran directly to the exit where the grenade exploded, and then jumped into the air. And the monster twisted its body almost as soon as Xia Bai came behind him, howled and rushed forward, almost without hesitation, jumped down after Xia Bai, crashed through the wall, crashed down, and fell. Above the ground, however, it failed to find the prey it was searching for, because Xia Bai didn't really jump down at all, but clung to the side of the building, and was now climbing back into the corridor. She glanced at the howling monster below, and took a deep breath. At this moment, a voice came from the earphone she was carrying. Captain, the backdoor direction has been confirmed to be lost. All members of Group C have been wiped out. One of the other two channels has temporarily lifted the alarm, and the other channel's alarm has been temporarily lifted. There are too many extreme variants and they are retreating. The captain of the Dawn Squad, known as the Special Forces among the Special Forces, is a woman like Xia Bai. She took a deep breath, walked back, and said, I have solved the problem temporarily, but depending on the situation, that thing will climb up again soon. However, our reinforcements are coming. You try to get in touch with them. All groups, I want you all to withdraw. Since reinforcement have arrived, it is enough for us to hold one point. Having said this, Xia Bai paused for a moment, glanced at the spacecraft shuttled through the window outside the window, remained silent for a moment, and said, the threat of the flying fish has been basically eliminated. We all evacuated to the rooftop, ready to board the plane and retreat at any time. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the channel, interrupting Xia Bai. Captain, this is Group D. There is a situation on my side. Xia Bai frowned slightly. Now she had arrived at the 8th floor and said directly, Group D. What's going on? The other side swallowed and said solemnly, Rambler, here we come. At this moment, Xia Bai's expression suddenly changed. She turned her head, pushed open the dilapidated door of an office on one side, and looked out. The first thing she saw was a terrifying blood red. The direction corresponding to this room is the coastal direction, which is opposite to the direction of the construction site. At this moment, the windows in this room are covered with sarcoma. Xia Bai could even see the beating granulation and plasma on the sarcoma, as well as the huge purulent red blood clots, which were slowly squirming, but exerting pressure on the entire glass. Under Xia Bai's gaze, the glass had begun to cracks appeared one after another, and it looked like it was in danger. Xia Bai's face changed wildly. She stepped back and closed the door tightly. At the same time, she said, everyone, please withdraw immediately. We will meet on the rooftop immediately. Xiao Chen, have you contacted the aircraft? Let it be sent immediately. Come down and take away item number 1. Several groups responded almost immediately. And Xiao Chen said, Captain, the rooftop cannot be walked. The ramblers are coming up, and the aircraft has not been contacted. Our communication equipment has been damaged long ago, and we can only maintain this short distance internal communication. I think. Xia Bai heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the room behind. For a long time, she fought in the Buncheng area and almost watched the ramblers land and occupy most of the city. Therefore, she knew better than anyone else what this seemingly slow-moving soft tissue creature possessed. What a powerful killing and destructive power. She took a deep breath, interrupted Xiao Chen's words, and issued an order. Everyone, let's meet in the lobby on the 3rd floor of the central hospital. We have to find a way to rush out. At this moment, she looked at the ground beneath her feet. She knew that there were a large number of extreme mutants in the lower floors, which were extremely dangerous. It was almost impossible to rush out of this building, but this was the only way. It won't take long for the Rambler to swallow up the entire building and the surrounding area. Once entangled by the Rambler, it will definitely be a dead end, and the target object will also fall. No one has been able to put anything in the hands of the Rambler. Grab it, even if it's non-organic. Therefore, they only have one choice. Just to break out. Even if the people don't get out alive, they must first send the target items out. Even if they die, they have completed the mission. What happens next depends on the brothers who come in for reinforcement. At this moment, they had no choice. There was a moment of silence in the message channel, followed by a chorus of responses. Xia Bai took a deep breath and said, we have reached the last moment. I hope we can fight side by side until the mission is completed. Chapter 180 No way forward or backward. Chapter 181 No way forward or backward. The fire is burning. The gunshots continued for a moment. Xia Bai and the others were trapped and died on the third floor at the end of the corridor in front of them. Among the flames, there was a terrifying creature roaring towards them. That thing was like a huge black ball of flesh with dense tentacle-like things growing on its body. Some were dangling in the space, while others were clinging to the wall on one side to assist it. Its body moves it forward at high speed. But this thing is like a gummy candy. Their bullets hit it without even the slightest effect. Now that it is replaced with a flamethrower, it finally has some effect. The thing's body burned in flames, but this road is no longer feasible. Because in their side room, the body of the walker has poured in like a flood. In Xia Bai's view, that kind of thing is not a living thing at all, but more like it is coming from the body of a certain creature. The collection of huge tumors removed from the body was disgusting and ugly. As the captain of the Dawn team, Xia Bai had read detailed information about this creature before carrying out this mission, and even detailed analysis data from the Changbei Mountain Headquarters Research Center. This kind of thing is actually very fragile. One bullet can blow it into pieces, but its regeneration ability is extremely amazing. As long as there is enough material, or if it is not killed in one breath, and not a single cell is left, it can regenerate. It rises up, and when regenerating, it will expand itself more quickly. This is a self-stress response after being injured, but this means that once it is attacked, it will grow and spread faster. Looking for materials. According to the final description of the Scientific Research Center, this thing is simply like an immature failed biochemical weapon. The biological form is actually collapsed, has no self-awareness, and cannot be controlled by anyone. Even the Rambler and extreme mutants cannot. Rather, it only has the simplest survival instinct. There is only one way to destroy it. Kill it from its roots, destroy it to the cellular level and completely break it up. The use of nuclear bombs is also the final measure to deal with it. It would be simple to destroy this thing before it grows up, but the walkers come from the ocean, and the scale is already terrifying when they land. Although the opponent is still there, the military had already launched an attack before they had completely landed, but it was now that they really determined the killing plan. If we don't seize the time to kill it, this thing will not only swallow up the entire Bincheng, but also the entire 3 eastern provinces and even the entire Earth. It may be completely swallowed up by it with its boundless development. All organic matter is nutrients for it. When it spreads all over the world, it will be the only creature like it left on the Earth. Therefore, the military urgently adopted extreme measures, intending to use nuclear weapons to directly eliminate this thing from its roots. And because a strike would intensify its growth, the military no longer launched attacks on it and only waited for the nuclear bomb to form. Xia Bai knew that once they were overtaken by the Ramblers, there would be only one consequence: the entire army would be annihilated. Even though the Ramblers usually moved slowly and expanded slowly, once it encountered food, it would move like a rabbit and would be destroyed in minutes. Able to capture a large living person directly. They still hold key things in their hands and must not die in the hands of the Ramblers here. Xia Bai ordered everyone to retreat, and with the few people left on his side, he retreated, planning to find another way downstairs. And just when they retreated to the stairwell at the back, where they had just been standing, the scholard hemorrhagic tumor broke through the door of the room on one side and directly pushed forward the one who was still in the flames without fear of death. The extreme mutants were completely swallowed up in it. Xia Bai took a deep breath, turned around, and walked directly down the safe passage in front of him. However, in this safe passage, although there is no walker organizational structure, a large number of extreme mutants have also poured in. Each one makes a terrifying howling sound, has a strange shape, and ferociously rushes towards Xia Bai and the others. They set up a fire line on the corridor and fired fiercely, sending bullets flying through the air. However, the entire safe passage was almost entirely crowded with extreme mutants, one next to another, and the physical strength of this Type 3 virus variant was extremely astonishing, and the self-regeneration ability was even more powerful. Xia Bai and the others opened fire in full force, but they could only barely stop these extreme mutants here. It was almost impossible to go downstairs from here. Point behind them, the biological tissues and organs of the walkers that poured in were expanding and spreading. Especially after they had just swallowed another extreme mutant, the tissues and organs of the walkers at this location were expanding and growing at a faster rate. It instantly rose to several levels and spread along the corridor. It didn't take long to reach behind them. This is an absolute crushing force. Unless they have strong enough firepower, it will be difficult for any tactics to break through the current situation head on at this moment. Xia Bai's expression changed slightly. At this moment, the wolf in front and the tiger in the back left little room for them. Xia Bai looked at the wall beside him and decided to blast it at a fixed point and jumped directly from the 3rd floor. They are all combat elites and they have their own methods for jumping from the 3rd floor. In fact, Xia Bai has thought of this for a long time, but has not implemented it because they still have something with them. Xia Bai couldn't help but turn his head and look at the cylindrical black object behind him, which was more than 1 meter high, but weighed a ton. Moreover, he didn't even have time to take protective measures on the outside, nor did he conduct a physical test on its body structure, so he jumped off the building. If you want to bring this thing down from the 3rd floor smoothly, the risk is too great. And with the current situation and the materials and equipment they have at hand, it is difficult to make anything buffering in the first place. After all, they have been trapped here for a long time. They retreated all the way from the original direction of Binchengport. They were walking around and fighting. They were almost out of bullets, and other available supplies were even more scarce. But at this moment, she had to take a risk. However, just when Xia Bai made up his mind and wanted to break through the wall on one side and jump directly from the 3rd floor, a loud explosion suddenly sounded in the venue, and the entire corridor was instantly covered by billowing smoke and dust. Swallowed in the smoke and dust, some kind of shocking and huge buzzing sound sounded in the field. Chapter 181 Battleship. Chapter 180 to Battleship. Looking through the smoke, the first thing Xia Bai saw was purple light. That was the flash of the battleship's shield. The battleship broke through the wall on one side and hit the muzzle directly in front of these extreme mutants. With one shot, half of the building was shaking. Immediately afterwards, the figure of the battleship emerged from the billowing smoke and dust. There was actually a ripple of hope in Xia Bai's heart that he could survive a desperate situation. However, just the next moment, she heard another loud noise. The sky seemed to split open. The wall directly above the battleship was suddenly torn open by something, and a huge mountain-like creature fell directly from above. It fell on the chaos of the battleship and frantically tore at the outer layer of the battleship. The shield was impossible to shake, and his hands were scorched in an instant. But this thing is nearly 20 meters long and has a human-like body structure. Its body is also densely covered with some kind of black scales similar to fish scales, but its power is astonishing. It can be killed from above, although it cannot hit it. It penetrated the battleship's shield, but still pressed the battleship and sank slightly by half an inch. Under this series of bombardments, coupled with the previous invasion of walkers, the entire hospital building was shaking slightly. Xia Bai could clearly see the cracks extending from the fault in the front corridor to her feet. The captain of the Dawn Squad changed his face slightly and shouted, "Fall back, everyone, fall back." However, backwards, they had no way to retreat. Behind them were the strollers slowly creeping in, like the Grim Reaper. Being killed by a rambler is even scarier than being killed by an extreme mutant. Being killed by an extreme mutant is actually a pleasant death. Even if you are infected and become a zombie after death, you will lose consciousness. It doesn't matter. But if you are entangled and wrapped in a walker, a living person will be digested alive. Falled off, extremely painful. But the hill-like monster landed on Xia Bai's battleship like it was going crazy. The entire building was shaking, smoke and dust were billowing, and countless rubbles were rustling. Xia Bai saw that the body of a huge extreme mutant like a hill was also wrapped with tumor-like tissue structures of numerous walkers, clinging to its body like tarsal maggots, as if to devour it. And it also behaves in extreme pain, as if it is crazy. Xia Bai also noticed this. This was the first time he had seen a walker, and he didn't know what the characteristics of this thing were, but Alpha had just scanned the main structure of the central hospital through a battleship. It had been eroded by walkers, and Xia Bai had just done that one collision. Coupled with this crazy monster, if this continues, the whole building will collapse. If this building collapsed, everything and people would be crushed underneath. Xia Bai couldn't afford to take such a risk. Therefore, he immediately turned the muzzle of the battleship's freezing turret and aimed it directly at the monster above the head of his battleship. At the same time, he controlled the traction tower, and in the chaos, he prepared to get the key item up first. Although the extreme mutant was large, except for the initial sudden attack which had a certain impact on the battleship, it was almost impossible to shake the battleship's condition. No matter how hard the monster exerted its force, Xia Bai's battleship still stopped steadily in the building of the battleship. At this moment, when Xia Bai opened fire, the body of the monster on the battleship was freezing rapidly, and the light of the battleship's tractor beam tower had steadily locked onto the black cylindrical object on the ground. From the outside, there is nothing extraordinary about that thing. It is completely black. From the outside, it looks like a big black thick pillar. At the same moment, Xia Bai's freezing turret was also firing. The body of the monster on the battleship with high power was being completely frozen, but it was still struggling crazily, even though the frozen body had begun to freeze piece by piece. Broken, but still seemingly unconscious, struggling and roaring desperately. Xia Bai's tractor beam tower had already hit the thing not far away, directly pulling the thing to slowly rise from the ground. However, this thing was much heavier than a person. Although the light of the tractor beam tower pulled it up, it stood up, but it was also shaky, as if it might fall at any time. Xia Bai was not a guy like Kyle Deming. She understood almost instantly what the battleship in front of her was doing. She immediately shouted and called a few people to go directly to help, dragging the black metal object to help pull it. Beam tower reduces stress. Xia Bai turned around, and with the other 3 soldiers on his side, they rushed side by side towards the corridor behind them, firing all out to intercept the tissues and organs of the surging walkers coming from behind. The more the walkers are attacked, the faster they multiply and expand. But at this moment, in this small space, Xia Bai and the others can temporarily block the walkers' progress through attacks in the space. Plasma splashed. There was a huge sound from the walls on both sides. Huge cracks burst out, and the entire main building of the central hospital was crumbling. From above the dome, huge structural fragments began to roar down from the sky. The walkers' tissues and organs are also advancing. In the corridor in front of Xia Bai, its expansion speed is getting faster and faster. With the stimulation of external attacks, this thing seems to be going crazy. The ground rolled towards everyone. At the back, the target object is still shrouded in the tractor beam, flying staggeringly towards the battleship. It may take only a few seconds to be contained in the spacecraft. The huge extreme mutation on the spacecraft, most of his body was frozen, and the tissues and organs of the walker that spread down from the roof were rolled up like a chicken. The organs and tissues above were obviously busy digesting the monster's flesh and blood. It seems that in just a few seconds, the mission can be accomplished, and the weird aircraft can leave the field gracefully with the mission goal. But Xia Bai looked at the organization of the ramblers who were offensive more and more fiercely in front of him, and realized that they might not even have these few seconds. The walker's tissues and organs have crowded the entire corridor and are rushing in. The bullets can only penetrate its organs, but cannot stop its advancement at all. With such momentum, it would take just a few seconds to engulf everyone in the audience. At this moment, Xia Bai made a bold decision. She wants to feed herself to the Rambler and use the other person's process of swallowing and digesting her to gain these critical seconds. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please collect it. Please give me a reward. Chapter 182 Impact. Chapter 183 Impact. Before Xia Bai could rush towards the tissues and organs of the approaching walkers, he heard a voice coming from the strange aircraft behind him. The voice was loud, and the tone was full of command and dominance. Everyone, get down here. Xia Bai was stunned for a moment, lowered his head almost instinctively, turned around, and saw the strange aircraft rumbling in the building, firing loudly among the various structures that collapsed. A 100mm caliber gun struck from the front. The moment Xia Bai opened fire, Xia Bai gasped and instinctively prepared a defensive posture. Immediately afterwards, Xia Bai heard a loud noise. and then felt his body fly out lightly and hit the cracked ground. His eyes went black for a while, and his head went blank. Xia Bai's cannon directly hit the organization of the ramblers coming from the corridor. For fear of affecting Xia Bai and the others, Xia Bai also deliberately raised the angle of the battleship's gun muzzle and did not dare to use it. The battleship's 380mm main gun. At this moment, the key alien items that Xia Bai said were worthy of being put into the battleship. If he hadn't fired the cannon just now, all the military members on the crumbling building would have been involved in the ramblers, and so would Xia Bai. There is no choice. This shot directly smashed the organizational structure of the ramblers who came there into splattering plasma. Flames, smoke, and plasma spread in the space. And this shot completely caused the already crumbling building to collapse. The construction level of the hospital is generally very high, but it cannot withstand such a torment. The entire building began to collapse, and huge metal plates fell heavily from the sky. Xia Bai regained consciousness in almost the shortest time. Although her brain was still blank, it was much better than before. However, she still couldn't hear anything in her ears, as if the world had fallen into absolute silence. She looked around in a daze and saw a mess of ruins, and most of the few remaining soldiers were in a mess. The whole building is shaking. Xia Bai raised his head and saw huge structural plates falling from the sky above the dome. Among them, there were also countless tissues and organs of the walkers, wrapping up the building materials, sweeping from the sky to the earth. At this moment, Xia Bai's somewhat groggy head was thinking, will he be crushed to death first and then swallowed? It doesn't seem like a good way to die, but it's not bad. The mission has been completed. Although I don't know what model the aircraft is, but I should be able to take that thing out of Bincheng smoothly. I should. As for myself, I have already, after completing the mission, and completing the mission as a soldier, then it doesn't matter if he dies like this. Yes, it doesn't matter. Just when Xia Bai was thinking this, the top of her head suddenly went dark. The aircraft came directly from one side and blocked their heads. With the steel body of the battleship, it blocked the debris falling from the sky. Xia Bai's face changed wildly. She knew that the ramblers could swallow the entire building at any time. It was extremely dangerous for them to do so. Leave us alone. Leave us alone, she murmured, struggling to support half of her body, looking at the cold and shining battleship above her head, and shouted in a hissing voice, retreat, retreat, and at this moment, the ground beneath her finally shattered completely. The ground cracked, and her body fell downwards. However, it was at this moment that the tractor beam tower directly projected a ray of light from the battleship above and enveloped Xia Bai's body, and then rays of light penetrated the space, illuminating those who were still alive. One by one, they were all stored into the battleship. Xia Bai just entered the battleship and hissed, retreat immediately. We must. At the same moment, Xia Bai was also changing the direction of the battleship. Now he has returned to the driving seat of the battleship. In this case, it is better for him to operate it. With the authority of the captain, he can directly dispatch and activate all functions of the battleship. Even if Xia Bai didn't say anything, Xia Bai knew that the situation was not good. With the collapse of the entire building, the walkers' organizational structure was coming from all directions. Moreover, this thing was more powerful than Xia Bai imagined. After contact, Xia Bai's battleship, Alpha and System almost simultaneously sent out collision alarms. Warn. An unknown dangerous creature is approaching, and a collision is about to occur. You know, before Xia Bai drove a battleship into a building and hit zombies, there was no such warning. This kind of collision warning would only be issued when the impact would cause damage to the battleship. The Rambler seemed like a puddle of mud, but it might be far more powerful than Xia Bai imagined. Xia Bai had never been in contact with this thing, and didn't know much information about it, but he didn't want to take risks. At that moment, he turned the battleship around, accelerated directly, and rushed outward. The building was collapsing, and the walkers' tissues and organs were being crushed, but Xia Bai's instant acceleration was very high. Almost in an instant, he walked out of the building and arrived outside the central hospital. Outside, Hu Jianming's troops had already arrived. They built a line of defense with their backs to the central hospital. To resist the extreme mutants coming from the other direction point at this moment, a caterpillar-like insect about more than 20 meters long crossed the direction of Hu Jianming and the others, and happened to hit Xia Bai and the others' battleship. It opened its mouth directly in the air, and wanted to directly biting Xia Bai's battleship point, and through the rear image, displayed on Xia Bai's holographic screen, he could clearly see that in just a short time, the walkers had already spread. This thing was much larger when viewed close up, than when viewed from a distance. Like a mountain of meat, several hundred meters high, it was as if a flood was coming. The collapsed central hospital was directly swallowed up by this thing. With a shocking loud noise, it was swallowed up entirely. The crimson and disgusting tissues and organs of the Rambler were still changing, running over everything along the street, following closely behind Xia Bai's battleship, like a beast that was closely following Xia Bai's battleship, wanting to swallow it whole. Xia Bai is raising the altitude point, but when he rushed out of the building of the central hospital, the first thing he hit was the bloody mouth of the huge extreme mutant like a white caterpillar. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 Biofactory. Chapter 184 Biofactory. Facing the oncoming huge mouth, Xia Bai accelerated without hesitation and pierced directly through it. Using the battleship as a cannonball, he directly penetrated through the middle of the mouth of this worm-like creature with a large amount of plasma. Penetrated the back of the head, and then quickly raised the height. But, collision warning. A large shadow is covering the battleship. Xia Bai raised his head, and in the 360-degree holographic field of vision, he saw a bloody mountain of flesh photographed head on point with a dense pile of flesh and blood tissue, and a soft tissue-like body. The walker instantly lifted up to a height of several hundred meters, turned into a giant flesh and blood hand in mid-air, photographed it directly from the air, and hit the battleship's hull heavily. The power it carried was so great that it was unbelievable, and it actually knocked down the battleship in the air. At the moment of impact, it was the first time that the battleship came into contact with this kind of walker. Alpha instantly began to scan the entire walker through this contact point, and began to construct the entire walker on a holographic screen on the other side of the battleship. Model point. The battleship that had just been raised upwards was knocked down from mid-air in this collision. The material piled up by the opponent was like a mountain, and the hand of flesh and blood tissue nearly 100 meters high was directly hit. It dropped from the air and pressed hard against the battleship all the way into the ground below. In an instant, Xia Bai's battleship was swallowed entirely by this thing. Point on all the monitors and holographic screens around him, the pictures displayed were all dense flesh and blood. Xia Bai directly turned on the battleship's full shield state, and all weapon platforms ceased fire in an emergency to ensure that there would be no direct contact between the battleship's main body and the walker's tissues and organs. At the position where the walker overlaps the shield, its flesh and blood is being burned and burned rapidly, but its growth power is extremely amazing. In just an instant, it can fill the gap and still exert airtight force on the battleship. Pressure point. At the same moment, Alpha's analysis results also came out. Because the contact area is too small compared to the main body of the walker, the analysis results that can be obtained are actually limited. But Alpha still successfully found the reason why this monster is so weird. You must know that the main power of the battleship is a small nuclear reactor, coupled with the instant acceleration of the anti-gravity engine and the top-level defense of the shield. Even if a mountain is really smashed down, it will be difficult to catch the battleship that is rapidly rising into the air. The head was swatted away like a fly. According to the modeling and analysis results of Alpha's outer sensors and impact data of the battleship, although this Rambler looks like a soft tissue creature composed of a pile of rotten meat, the organization is also layered, and the way it exerts force is also unique, and more preferring to suppress the center of gravity. At this moment, although it seems that only part of the tissue of the walker is pressing up, in fact, at this moment, the center of gravity of the walker's entire body is shifting in this direction, and the force of the pressure is instantaneous. almost 1/3 of its total weight point, and you must know that this thing now occupies almost 1/3 of Bincheng, and its weight is absolutely incredible point. But Xia Bai's battleship still passed through this huge pressure, charging forward steadily in a piece of sticky flesh point. When it was just mashed down, it felt like being swatted away like a fly, but now that it is trapped in the tissue of this thing, it is a different feeling point. It felt like being stuck in a quagmire, or like a little fly trapped in a large ball of snot. It was extremely nauseating, but it happened that there was no strength left in it, and it could not be used point. And this thing is also secreting a strange thing, which is even affecting the outer electromagnetic shield. And as the battleship is trapped in its body for a longer time, the secreted mucus will affect the protection of the battleship. The impact of the shield is also becoming more and more serious according to Alpha's analysis results. The Rambler is undergoing adaptive mutations. Based on the battleship point, it swallowed the battleship entirely into its body and began a certain digestion process. The first thing it had to do was to prevent the prey from escaping, and then it decomposed and digested it. The Rambler's digestion method is much more advanced than humans. It will secrete specific digestive juices for disintegration and digestion. Based on the feedback of the prey it swallows on its tissues, this thing looks like a large pile of disgusting and useless soft tissue creatures, but internally, it is more like a sophisticated and complete giant living biological machine point. And what supports it is a mutant virus. The existence of this virus gives it unlimited regeneration and survivability. Moreover, according to Alpha's analysis indicators, the virus activity on the edifier is even far higher than before in New Zealand, above the one encountered in Beijing. With its current biological size and digestion speed, it hardly takes long to digest the things it swallows, and the absorption process is even more incredibly short. As long as a little bit of tissue and organ remains, you can quickly complete self-increase and grow infinitely. Point at this moment, Xia Bai was thinking of what Jikazi had said to him when he was in Langjiang province. The genetic sequence of this virus seemed to have a genetic factor similar to that of sharks that allows them to grow indefinitely. Point, this thing looks like garbage, but in fact, it is a biological factory with biological functions that far exceed human cognition. And even a war machine. Point, not only can this thing grow infinitely, it also has a hunting system, digestive system, and instant regeneration function that can support its own unlimited growth. No wonder the military wants to use nuclear weapons on this thing. Point, if Xia Bai were to deal with this thing, with the battleship's existing force, it would be difficult for him to think of anything he could use to fight this monster. The existence of this thing even goes against the common sense and theorem of biology on Earth. There is no need for any key alien items to prove the existence of alien creatures. The mere existence of such a creature is enough to prove the origin of this virus. The current battleships were helpless against this thing. Xia Bai could only rely on his own anti-gravity engine to try to rush out before he was digested. Point, the battleship's engine had reached maximum power, and Xia Bai had opened its shield to its maximum level. In the cold flash of light, it sprinted forward among the dense flesh and blood of the walker. Although Xia Bai couldn't fight against this thing, he was confident of rushing out. Point, the spread speed of the walker is limited. Previously, the battleship appeared at the edge of the walker's spreading biological area. With the speed and power of the battleship, even if it is difficult to advance, it will definitely be able to rush out of the walker's body before being digested. Chapter 184, I'm Hu Jianming. Chapter 185, I'm Hu Jianming. The battleship is jolting violently, the Scarlet alarm lights are flashing crazily, and the anti-gravity engines are making a huge buzzing sound. However, despite this, inside the battleship, the oozing sound of the squirming organs and tissues of the walkers outside can still be clearly heard. Sound. Point, Xia Bai's face was pale. She was sitting in the corner, clutching the armrest on one side, but looking at the other corner. Their mission target was in that direction, and the two women were holding it tightly to prevent the thing from colliding with the surroundings due to the vibration of the battleship. Point, the two women were naturally Baolan and Li Hanayu. The two awakened ones were more powerful than men. They pressed the black metal cylinder in two directions and pressed it firmly to the ground. Point, at this moment, everyone else in the battleship was silent. Everyone knew that in this situation, they could not help at all and could only look to Xia Bai and the battleship. Point, Xia Bai's heart was filled with ice coldness. She had been in contact with the walker a lot, and she knew the nature of this thing very well. Even though it was a mud-like soft tissue creature, its predatory ability was extremely amazing, and it also had a strong ability to hunt independently. It even preyed on overloaded fighter jets that bombed it at low altitudes of 100 meters, and tanks and armored vehicles were commonplace. For such a long time, Xia Bai had never seen anything swallowed by this monster and still come out alive. However, Xia Bai obviously underestimated the capabilities of the battleship. As long as the power and structure of the battleship can withstand this thing, with the dual positioning of the battleship's radar system and the Black Hawk 13 still hovering in the sky under the control of Li Jingjiang. Xia Bai's battleship has been advancing in a straight line to the edge of the nearest Walker organization layer. Although it is adapting at high speed, and it can digest Xia Bai's battleship, but its organizational strength is limited. It may be able to create a tight space through dense stacking, but under the sprint of the battleship, the resistance of this stacked flesh to the battleship is even less. Not as useful as the mucus it secretes to lubricate. Xia Bai's battleship sprinted forward steadily against the huge pressure exerted by the monster from top to bottom on the battleship's hull. Breaking out of the Rambler's organizational structure seems to be a long process, but in fact it only takes a dozen seconds. Moreover, in the outer circle of the Rambler's organization, the reinforcement troops previously led by Hu Jianming had already turned their guns, ignoring the other extreme mutants that were still attacking them, and opened fire on the entire structure of the Rambler's organization. However, in these 10 seconds, Xia Bai's battleship's shield had almost reached its limit. The battleship's shield not only needed to resist the digestive juices of the walkers, but the most important pressure came from the pressure brought by the walkers on the top. Comes huge pressure. That was the weight of almost the entire body of this monster. Even a building was about to be crushed. Within 10 seconds, the battleship's shield was almost reaching the limit of its energy consumption point, and at this moment, Xia Bai's battleship rushed out of the walker's tissues and organs with a large rain of blood splashing in the 26th second, after it was swallowed by the walker. The battleship shield system is offline. The shining shield on the battleship shone for a final moment, then completely dimmed. The entire battleship sank top heavy. At this moment, from the sky on one side, a terrifying extreme mutant flew ferociously, spreading its wings and fangs, and rushed towards it. The two triple 25mm caliber cannons at the front and rear of the battleship instantly turned around, and the 6 machine guns opened fire instantly, tearing the body of the extreme mutant into pieces in the air, and turning it into pieces of flesh and blood scattered all over the sky. But at this moment, there were screams in the sky, and 3 or 4 of the same extreme mutants roared in, wanting to attack the battleship. However, it was at this moment that in the darkness, tentacles of flesh and blood stretched out of thin air. Come on. These extreme mutants were rolled back in an instant like a frog hunting. Xia Bai looked back through the battleship's display screen and saw the walker's organized body standing inch by inch from the ground. In midair, it expanded like a mountain, 300 to 400 meters high, like a huge wave. It slammed down from the top of the battleship, which had no time to lift up, before this huge mountain of flesh and blood hit the building. The blood in the flesh and blood tissue fell like rain. However, at this moment, the sound of cannons suddenly sounded on the ground. That was when Hu Jianming and the others opened fire. Hu Jianming's troops had already suffered heavy losses. At this moment, they completely gave up on self-defense and formed a neat line on the ground. Ignoring the attacks from many land extreme mutants, they all raised their muzzles and shot into the sky. The bodies of the walkers in the air fired in unison, blocking the falling giant mountain in midair. Hu Jianming's voice sounded in the channel. I'm Hu Jianming, the military leader of this operation. I want to confirm whether we have obtained target item number 1. Xia Bai looked at the group of death fronts on the ground, who were firing desperately, and responded calmly, we got it, but, on the ground, the military's battle formation was being torn to pieces. The top deck of a tank was opened by monsters, and the soldiers inside were still firing at the walkers in the sky. And Hu Jianming's voice was as calm as ever. I'm Hu Jianming, the military leader of this operation. I will lead my troops to buy you the last time. Please leave Bincheng immediately and stay away from the nuclear weapons explosion range. Please evacuate as soon as possible. Always take the target item to a safe area. I am Hu Jianming, the military leader of this operation. On behalf of our ministry, I would like to pay tribute to you. Xia Bai looked at the broken army at his feet, took a deep breath, directly raised the battleship, accelerated directly in midair, and flew into the distant sky. Across a long distance, he asked Hu Jianming. The last voice came back. Thank you. The battleship continued to climb, but his eyes were still looking back at the calm and struggling soldiers at the central hospital point. Even if death is on the line, they still open fire with all their strength, even if they know that no matter whether this mission succeeds or fails, they will never survive. They still fight until the last moment, even if they know that the city will be engulfed by the flames of nuclear weapons sooner or later. They still here, never wavering point. If you were in the same situation as the other person, would you be so brave? Xia Bai didn't know, he only knew that he would remember that sentence for many years to come. I'm Hu Jianming, the military leader of this operation. Chapter 185, An Unexpected Blow. Chapter 186, An Unexpected Blow. At 6:53 p.m. on March 21st, 2019, over Bincheng Point, Xia Bai discovered an infrared tracking missile point that was not a nuclear missile that would be launched at 7:30. The launch of nuclear weapons was no child's play. The emergency time was scheduled to occur at 7:30, and it was hitting a fixed target, so it was unlikely to change point. In fact, this missile was aimed at Xia Bai's battleship point. It was a Eugen 7 missile, equipped with an armor-piercing warhead, roaring from the far end of the sky, chasing Xia Bai's warship in the sky point. And this is not the only missile, it is just the first missile to enter the warship's anti-missile radar warning zone. In addition to this missile, there are 4 other missiles with slightly different models, but they all target the warship here. The missiles all originate from extremely far away places, and warships cannot trace them back. Point zombies can't launch missiles, and extreme mutants have no such ability. Point even intelligent zombies can't get such a thing now. Point Xia Bai realized almost immediately that someone was plotting against him. Point it is a common thing for people to hit others, whether before or after the apocalypse. Point, but Xia Bai's actions this time were actually very secretive. When Li Jianbei came to find him, it was a separate meeting. Li Jianbei was still counting on Xia Bai to bring the alien item back, and it was impossible to attack him at this critical moment. On the Anyang mountainside, Xia Bai's battleship is still the strongest force in Anyang Mountain. As long as it moves, there will be almost no secrets. So, is it over there at Anyang Mountain? Xia Bai didn't know. Point the missiles have already arrived, and the battleship's shield module has just been seriously damaged under the pressure of the Rambler. Intercepting the missiles is the most important thing now. Point there are still more than half an hour before nuclear bombs are going to clear the ground here. If we are hit by a missile now, it will be fatal. Point the missile flies extremely fast, and it is almost impossible for Xia Bai to intercept it manually, but the battleship has Alpha. Point Xia Bai directly issued a series of instructions, authorizing Alpha to use the battleship's fire control radar system, allowing it to cooperate with the fire control radar system to intercept missiles. He even let go of the battleship's operating handle and gave the battleship complete authority to Alpha, allowing it to intercept missiles at its maximum limit at this moment. Point Alpha took over the warship and made a sudden break in midair, stopping the warship instantly. Then he turned the warship's hull, fired a missile in the air, and hit the first roaring missile head on. Point the explosion vibrated in midair, and the smoke and fire engulfed the entire battleship almost instantly. Point what followed was a dazzling operation for Xia Bai. He only knew that the battleship's missile bay fired several missiles in succession, and the rear macro missile array fired in a row. Point the remaining 4 missiles came from 2 directions. Xia Bai's vision was obscured by thick smoke and fire, and he could only use radar to confirm the distance between the 4 missiles and the battleship. Point others at the back didn't understand what was going on at first. They didn't realize the situation until the first missile was intercepted nearby. Then they realized from the denser explosion that there was more than one incoming missile. Point everyone was terrified, including Xia Bai, because Alpha's operation was too fierce. It stopped the battleship and only made fine adjustments to the battleship's direction and position. From the radar, the missiles were all. The interception was completed at an extremely close distance point. The first few were pretty good, but the last one, in Xia Bai's eyes, was approaching the battleship infinitely, and was about to bombard it. Point Alpha sounded the alarm, and the warnings of the battleships and systems were even linked. Point Xia Bai's face changed slightly. He finally couldn't sit still at this moment and directly regained control of the battleship. He instantly turned off the battleship's engine, reversed 180 degrees in midair, and hit the ground at his feet like a cannonball. He rushed forward, but the infrared tracking device was still in hot pursuit. Point at the same moment that Xia Bai controlled the battleship to dive down, Alpha opened fire again, directly detonating the last missile with its automatic cannon. Point under the close explosion, the battleship was also violently shaken. Battleship balance system failure. Switched to full manual mode. The warship cleared the alarm at the last moment when it was about to hit the ground. Xia Bai directly twisted the body of the warship, rose upwards, and passed by the roof of a scrapped bus, but then hit a roaring one. The extreme mutant carried the high-speed battleship directly through it, cutting it all in half. In fact, with the current state of the 4th level battleship, even if it takes one, it is actually affordable. However, Alpha has done a good job at the moment. Although the interception process of these 5 missiles was thrilling, it managed to escape in the end. Point Xia Bai's face at the back was also a little ugly. She looked at the people in the cabin, who were also in shock, stretched out a finger and said, "Your pilot is awesome." The one who was awesome was not Xia Bai, but Alpha. With regard to fire control and interception, even if he was asked to intercept at a fixed point, he would not be able to stop 5 missiles that penetrated the air at high speed. Point for the first time, Xia Bai felt that this rubbish artificial intelligence Alpha was quite powerful. Point. Although Alpha's intelligence is not high, as an AI computer and a combat model equipped on battleships, it is naturally not bad in terms of functionality. Point Xia Bai was slowly exhaling a breath, but at this moment, the battleship's alarm suddenly sounded again. Point warn. Abnormal creatures are approaching. Xia Bai turned his head in astonishment and saw something like Tarzan rolling up a bus and jumping high from the side. It was very similar to the monster Xia Bai saw at the central hospital before. It jumped from a high altitude. The bus and his body hit the battleship. Xia Bai was about to take off from the side, and then the bus shattered and the monster's body flew back and smashed into the building on the other side. There was an earth-shaking loud noise. At the same time, Xia Bai's battleship was also hit and smashed into another building. In a building on the side, with a loud noise, half of the battleship was buried in the ruins. Xia Bai was really annoyed this time. Point damn it, people beat me, and zombies beat me. Doesn't this allow people to live a good life? He directly raised the battleship slowly. The balance system was damaged and could only be maintained by full manual operation. Fortunately, Xia Bai's 2nd level battleship was fully manual before, and the 4th level battleship was not that large. Now Xia Bai directly controls it. As the battleship rose on the spot, thinking that it would still be some time before the nuclear bomb dropped, he wanted to kill all these extreme mutants to vent his anger. 10 updates. Please subscribe, vote monthly, and support me in any way. Chapter 186 Leaving the Battlefield. Chapter 187 Leaving the battlefield. Xia Bai's battleship took off, and all kinds of machine guns and naval guns turned around, intending to hit the extreme mutant spawned by the Type 3 variant virus, just like Tarzan, who dared to use a bus as a baseball bat to hit himself into a sieve point. But in this world, things never seem to develop the way people think. Xia Bai's battleship rose into the air, and he saw the street in front of him. All kinds of strange mutants were rushing over like a black wave. Humanoids, Inhumans, and even sea lion-like things were running wildly on the ground, densely packed. Hundreds and thousands of them swarmed over, all infected with the Type 3 variant virus. Xia Bai took a breath, shouted "Excuse me," dropped a missile, and directly controlled the battleship to take off on the spot, directly rising into the sky. Just kidding. Type 3 virus infected bodies are not easy to kill. There are so many here. If he is trapped here and starts killing, How long will it take for him to escape unscathed? The wind pulls tightly, and the 36 stratagem moves to the position point anyway. After fighting for a day, it was time to retreat. Xia Bai controlled the battleship, rising directly over Bincheng, and traveling at high speed outside Bincheng Point. It was only about 7 o'clock at this time, and there was still nearly half an hour before Li Jian Bai's nuclear attack on Xia Bai's Bincheng. This time was enough for Xia Bai and the others to escape from the Bincheng area. There was silence inside the battleship point. Liu Bei and his 3 combat teams. There were less than 10 people left on the battleship now. They looked at each other with Bailan and the others, and no one knew how to speak. However, everyone was slightly relieved as they watched Bincheng being gradually left behind by the battleship point. Yi Hanai leaned back directly and sat in a comfortable position without any image. Bailan was still holding down the black columnar alien object. When she came here before, Xia Bai specifically told him to keep an eye on this thing. If it was something important, they probably wouldn't. I'll turn this thing in. Therefore, Bailan was pressing the key item at the moment, his eyes somewhat wary. Liu Bei didn't notice anything. She looked up and down in the battleship. To be honest, she had too many things she wanted to ask. What's going on with this battleship? What is the motivation? Are the weapons too dense? Was that shield the legendary energy shield? Moreover, it seems that the people in this battleship are not members of the military, but more like ordinary survivors. Of course, although they are called ordinary survivors, this group of people is definitely an extraordinary type among ordinary survivors. The situation was dangerous just now, and Liu Bei's mind was all on that key item, but now, she finally had time to be confused by the situation she was in, and the group of people in front of her. Where did these guys come from? Liu Bei felt that he had heard of such a group of survivors somewhere, but now he had no impression of it. The warship was still moving smoothly through the sky at a very fast speed, and soon it was out of the direction of Bincheng and the possible explosion range of a nuclear weapon strike. At this time, Xia Bai slowed down slightly and began to slow down the battleship. The damage caused by those 5 missiles to the battleship was really not great. Although they were all detonated at close range, this close range is also relative. Even the last infrared tracking missile detonated was 30 meters away from the battleship. The location is also nearly 10 meters away, and the 4th level defense device is already far different from the 3rd level crispy armor. This level of close range explosion has now only damaged the outer armor of the battleship. Just lost a few percentage points. However, it was the previous walker's attack that severely damaged the entire battleship. The shield function was overloaded and is now flying, and the internal pressure on the battleship was equally severe. In a dense space, the lethality of the Rambler is self-evident. Xia Bai was now almost out of the range of Bincheng, so he began to slow down and began the battleship repair process while flying towards Anyang Mountain. After all, the rapid operation of a battleship puts a burden on the entire battleship. Now that we are out of the danger zone, there is no need to travel at such a high speed. The strength of that walker was indeed beyond Xia Bai's expectation. In human civilization, there are many monster-related movies in which nuclear bombs have been used as the final solution. However, most of the monsters in those movies are in a ferocious state, like Godzilla, or even possessing abilities like atomic breath. Compared to them, the Rambler is simply ugly. That is a large group of giant sarcoma, but it is extremely dangerous, unkillable, unbeatable, infinitely spreading, infinitely digestible, and infinitely devouring. Its biological appearance seems so low-end, but it possesses a variety of natural biological advantages that make people frightened. Just relying on these biological advantages of it, if it is not stopped, even capable of swallowing the entire Earth. By the end of the night, Xia Bai had collected 7 to 8,000 energy points. Each of the mutant virus infections active in Bincheng could provide at least 200 energy points to the battleship, and most of the mutant virus infections, the energy points that the body can provide, are all around 500, and 2 are equivalent to 1000 energy points. Of course, this kind of extreme mutant is also extremely difficult to kill, just like the ones Xia Bai encountered outside Xinjiang City before. It seemed to be killed in the conventional sense, and even turned into a puddle of mud, but it was still tenacious. Therefore, Xia Bai defeated a large number of mutant virus infected bodies. However, due to time constraints, Xia Bai had to bring out the key thing again, so there were few opportunities to make a last-ditch attack. Not many people were killed by him, and the battleship successfully absorbed the energy points. Otherwise, the number of energy points Xia Bai could collect in one night would have exceeded 10,000 points, but despite this, the number of energy points Xia Bai currently has reached 15,000. Xia Bai drove the battleship through the sky, but he couldn't help but show a look of contemplation. How about hunting these people along the coast in the future? It's a little more troublesome, but one end has at least 200 energy points, which is equivalent to 200 zombies. However, Xia Bai's original purpose of hunting zombies in Shengjing was not only to earn energy points, but also because he planned to create a vacuum safe zone for zombies on this side of Anyang Mountain Point. After all, the situation of coexisting with zombies must be broken and resolved sooner or later. This chapter is an additional update for book lovers who will be rewarded for not being stuck in traffic jams every day. In addition, please continue to ask for all kinds of support. Brothers, chapter 187, I'm actually very poor. Chapter 188, I'm actually very poor. Not long after Xia Bai's warship landed on Anyang Mountain, he heard a loud roar from the end of the sky point. At this time, the sky had completely darkened. The sky was filled with thick clouds, and there were no stars or moon point. But from the location of Anyang Mountain, it is impossible to see the scene of Bincheng Point. The distance between the two is still relatively far. The sound was very clear. From the Anyang mountainside, it sounded like something falling on the ground, making a heart-shaking sound. Everyone in the battleship knew that a nuclear weapon had landed. Xia Bai glanced at the time. The time was extremely accurate, exactly 7:30, without any deviation. As for whether this nuclear bomb can kill the ghost thing called Rambler, Xia Bai has nothing to worry about. The reason is actually very simple. In the previous life, this should have happened. Rambler, they landed on the coastline of Bincheng and were eventually destroyed by the military with nuclear weapons. However, Xia Bai was not here at the time. It was very difficult for him to survive among ordinary zombies, so he did not know the situation here. But after the nuclear attack in the previous life, there were no monsters like the Walker appearing. Obviously, the nuclear weapons worked and completely killed the monster. Therefore, Xia Bai can still rest assured about the results of the victory. Xia Bai also thought for a moment, if he could kill the giant walker, how many energy points should be captured for him? But it is a pity that that thing is indeed not something Xia Bai's 4th level battleship can fight against. For creatures like the Wanderer, all that is needed is a sanitized killing process. Kill all the walkers from the cellular level in one breath. Of course, Xia Bai didn't need to worry about this kind of thing. The military would naturally spend a lot of effort on the Rambler's affairs. Xia Bai's operation in Anyang Mountain has been completed, but he did not go to Changbei Mountain immediately after obtaining the number 1 target item and hand it over to the military as agreed with Li Jianbei. Xia Bai wanted to see what this was for himself first. Therefore, as soon as the battleship landed, Xia Bai invited everyone off the battleship. He planned to drive the battleship into the air raid shelter dock at the back, and then analyze the number 1 target. His battleship now has a small semi-laboratory analysis equipment, and Alpha, an intelligence system that has pretty good functions except for the low level of AI. He believes that he has a way to figure out whether this thing is an alien creature. What is the function of this thing, and why does it appear in Bincheng? In this regard, Bailan and others had no objections, but Liu Yibei and others were somewhat reluctant to do it. Although Liu Yibei had lost contact with the military headquarters far away in Changbei Mountain before, she also knew the general situation. What they wanted to do was to escort target number 1 back to the survivor base in Changbei Mountain. What would happen if they landed in Anyang Mountain? Xia Bai also didn't mention the number 1 target. The battleship landed at the helicopter pad behind Anyang Mountain. He even personally found the captain of the Dawn team and said, "Hello, I'm from the Anyang Mountain survivor base. Xia Bai, the person in charge, I think you can see that we are not from the military. We are just a survivor organization that has a cooperative relationship with the military. However, we are all human beings, and our goals are the same. Moreover, I also admire what you have done in the Bincheng area. I think without your efforts, it would be difficult for the survivors in the entire 3 eastern provinces to live so comfortably." On behalf of all the members of Anyang Mountain, I would like to express my sincere respect to you. Now that you have come to Anyang Mountain, I dare not say anything else, but I can guarantee that you are absolutely safe now. I will personally take care of you soon. You are sent back to Bai Mountain, but today, you see, it is getting late, and you have worked hard. Why not just rest for a night in our Anyang Mountain? Let us treat you well, and also express our respect and gratitude. What do you think? From the information Li Jianbei gave him before, Xia Bai knew that the captain of the Dawn team was a woman, and even saw the other party's ID photo, but it was only now that Xia Bai officially saw the real person. Liu Bei point the other party was a soldier, and her figure was not to mention. The semi-tight combat uniform outlined her perfect body curves. Even though her face and body were dirty after a long battle, she still has a heroic spirit like a sword. She is an absolute beauty point, but she looked a little ugly at this moment. The battleship did not belong to the military. In fact, Liu Bei also found out later, but when she listened to Xia Bai's words, how could she not hear the true meaning and purpose of Xia Bai's words? Moreover, Xia Bai's words did not mention the number one target. Instead, he cunningly blocked Liu Bei's rejection point, but it's a pity that Liu Bei is a soldier, and she doesn't follow Xia Bai's example. She said seriously and meticulously, there is no need for dinner and rest. To resist danger, that is what we should do. We don't need you to escort us personally. Only one car is needed to return to the Bai Mountain survivor base overnight. Xia Bai was talking to Liu Bei alone. Apart from him and Liu Bei, only Bailan stood behind Xia Bai at this moment. Xia Bai didn't expect that Liu Bei refused so straightforwardly, and the other party didn't follow his routine at all. Bailan was a little funny on the side, but she still just had a cold face. She didn't know what to do in this situation. She just looked at Xia Bai beside her. She probably knew the target number one Xia Bai is bound to win, so he also wants to see what Xia Bai will do. Xia Bai is a veteran. He has never seen anything before. He thought for a while, the smile on his face did not change, and just said, well, I can actually understand your mood of wanting to seize the time to complete the tasks assigned by above, but I really don't have a car here. Liu Bei was shocked when he heard this. This guy is obviously talking nonsense. She said, you have such a big survivor base, and you don't even have a car. Xia Bai nodded and said calmly, the current situation is indeed like this. Although our place looks big, it is actually very poor. In the past 2 days, we were engaged in large-scale agricultural production and all the cars were scrapped. Now we only have battleships. It can be driven, but you also saw my battleship. With that thing here, I don't have to worry about small-scale zombies or any chaos breaking out inside Anyang Mountain. Even if it breaks out, I have the ability to suppress it with force, right? 12 chapters have been completed. For a book, the number of subscriptions directly determines whether or not a book will be recommended in the future and how far it will go. Therefore, I hope everyone can support the original version. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for collection, and ask for help. Recommended votes. Happy National Day everyone. Thank you. This chapter is a reward from book friend Chungwa 2002. Thank you for your support. Thanks to Yu Ye Weifeng, 8,768,767 for the 10,000 rewards, the birth of the first elder and the 9th helmsman of this book. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 12 has been completed, and I have gone to bed. I have fulfilled my promise, and I hope to get your return and support. As the old saying goes, please subscribe, please vote for me, please collect, and please recommend. Happy National Day, everyone. Thank you. Chapter 188 Let Yourself Go. Chapter 189 Let Yourself Go. Liu Bei took a deep breath. She looked at Xia Bai with a springy smile on her face, and what she was thinking was, have you let yourself go to deceive others? Exclamation mark. What is the logical connection between agricultural production and destroying all cars? It's all nonsense, but her expression was still serious and cold. She looked at the person in front of her and said, are you threatening me? Xia Bai smiled. I just want to ask you to stay for one night. Of course, Xia Bai was threatening. He even said the line agricultural production destroyed all the cars. The meaning was actually very clear, but there was no real quarrel point. He might give that thing to the military, but before giving it to the military, he had to figure out what it was. Moreover, Xia Bai doesn't want to really break up with each other. The relationship between him and the military has always been good, and there is nothing wrong with what the Dawn team wants to do now. Without their insistence, Xia Bai wants to get this number 1 target. Items don't know how much trouble it will cost. Xia Bai has always had respect for soldiers and has never really wanted to have any conflict with the military. As he said, we are all human beings and everyone has the same goal. There is no point in fighting with each other. At this moment, Balan, who was standing behind Xia Bai, took a slight step forward and stood side by side with Xia Bai. Xia Bai couldn't help but pursed her lips. To be honest, if there was only one Xia Bai here, she would still have the idea of taking action. If she could capture Xia Bai, everything would be easy, but Balan is an awakened one. If she takes action rashly, not only may she fail to achieve the goal, on the contrary, their own goals may completely stalemate the relationship between the two parties. Although the Dawn Squad is known as the Special Forces among the Special Forces, there are no awakened ones among them. Even Xia Bai, the captain, is not an awakened one. Of course, this does not affect their ability to complete the combat missions assigned by them. The awakened ones, it may play an important role in some places, but in most cases, the role that a fully prepared tactical team can play is far superior to that of the awakened ones. However, in the current situation, Xia Bai found that he seemed to have no choice but to swallow his anger. Taking advantage of the current opportunity, it is difficult to obtain the awakened ones, and if we mobilize the people on our side, they still have battleships. Xia Bai's chest was rising and falling slightly. She was silent for a moment and said, I want to get in touch with Changbai Mountain. Xia Bai nodded and said, no problem, you can contact Changbai Mountain at any time. I said before that Anyang Mountain Survivor Base cooperates with the military of Changbai Mountain Survivor Base. Otherwise, as before, under such circumstances, it is impossible for me, an ordinary survivor, to go to Bincheng to rescue you. I can't guarantee anything else. It's inevitable that you will have good food, drink, and accommodation here. Xia Bai glanced at Xia Bai, then at Balan, and then nodded slowly. I will get in touch with the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base now. Xia Bai did not refuse, and let Li Jinggyang take her there. When Xia Bai led his people away, Balan said, we'd better find someone to keep an eye on them. These people are combat elites after all. If they really want to do something, we may not be able to do anything about it. Xia Bai nodded. However, Xia Bai is not worried about the fact that Xia Bai contacted the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base. Anyway, the Emperor on his side is far away from the dead pig and is not afraid of boiling water. Moreover, it is more complicated on the other side of Changbai Mountain. There are still people who don't want to know how many people have to pay for this. The number 1 target of life was brought back. Therefore, in Xia Bai's view, whether Xia Bai was in contact with the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base had almost no impact on him. After solving the problem here, Xia Bai immediately drove the battleship into the air raid shelter. While repairing the battleship, he directly started scanning the thing with Alpha and the battleship's analysis laboratory. This thing weighs 1 ton. From the outside, it looks like a black metal cylinder with a smooth and dark surface, like a pillar made of obsidian or an unused black load-bearing pillar. From the appearance, the material of this thing does not look like metal. But during a scan of the battleship's system, it was confirmed that this thing contained some kind of sophisticated electronic equipment, and it seemed to be emitting some kind of stable signal. According to the battleship's analysis of this thing, it is certain that the outer layer of this thing should be some kind of defensive layer, and it needs to be unlocked in a specific way to open it and see the really important equipment wrapped inside. But if you want to really open this thing, it will take a certain amount of time. If other cracking methods are used, it is likely to trigger some emergency measures carried by the thing itself, which will cause some immeasurable consequences. Xia Bai couldn't help with this kind of thing. He could only wait. However, it has been confirmed that this thing is definitely not something on the earth. It should really come from space and alien creatures that invade the Earth. The battleship's scan of the outside of this thing showed that there are several elements of this thing that have never been seen on Earth. Moreover, the battleship has now reached level 4, even with the most modern security and military systems on Earth. It won't take too long to crack, but right now, the battleship's estimated cracking time for Xia Bai is as high as 17 hours. Although the computing power currently possessed by the 4th level battleship has not broken through the boundaries of human beings, it is definitely the top level on the Earth today. It would take 17 hours to crack the security system of this thing. Even if Xia Bai handed it over to the military Fang, this speed can't be faster. Xia Bai had to wait 17 hours here, so Xia Bai calmed down. This kind of thing couldn't be rushed, so he started to work on other things. Xia Bai is still in contact with the direction of Changbai Mountain. In that room, there is a monitoring device installed by Xia Bai. The communication between Xia Bai and the military is under Xia Bai's control. Yang Zhen will identify it. If there is any unexpected situation, Xia Bai would be able to find out immediately. And things are indeed as Xia Bai thought. The situation on the Changbai mountainside is very complicated. Li Jianbei wants to transport things back to Changbai Mountain immediately, but there is also a group of military factions headed by Nkizheng. Firmly object. However, no matter what the situation is over there, Xia Bai can't let go for the time being. But at this moment, he directly found who are Nkiulan. Brothers, please subscribe to the official version. 17,000 collections, more than 200 ordered. It's really miserable. I want to support the original version. I spent so much time updating 12 chapters, and it only cost $1.02. Thanks to Li's father, Vi, and Zufan for their 10,000 rewards. The 10th and 11th helmsmen of this book were born. I owe 4 more chapters for updates. Please allow me to wait for 2 days, and I will definitely honor them. Finally, thank you to everyone. Brothers who support me, subscribe to the official version, vote, and reward. Thank you for your support. Although from the current point of view, the results are poor, I will continue to go forward. I hope everyone can continue to support herbal tea in this book. Thanks. Chapter 189 Chat. Chapter 190. Small talk. Xia Bai brought Huang Qiulan here, mainly because of the 5 missiles that roared towards him in Bincheng today. Li Jianbei secretly contacted him for his action this time, but the 5 missiles were obviously aimed at him with a clear target. There are 3 possibilities that Xia Bai can think of. The first is that Li Jianbei leaked some information, and some of Xia Bai's enemies, or the enemies of Li Jianbei's group, want to kill Xia Bai. The second is that Xia Bai, when the warship entered Bincheng before, he had passed by the military troops, so it was not surprising that he was targeted for attack. Thirdly, Xia Bai himself was leaked by someone in Anyang Mountain. Feng Sheng got in touch with someone in Changbai Mountain and wanted to kill him. As far as Xia Bai could think of, there were 2 groups of people who wanted to kill him. The first was the people from the 13 Kings faction. Although the 13 Kings themselves were ordinary survivors, they had military personnel from the Scientific Research Center. With Fang's background, using a few missiles is not a problem. Secondly, there is a hostile faction with Li Jianbei. They are also the military, and they also have reasons to attack Xia Bai, the guy who is going to bring back the #1 target item. To be honest, Xia Bai was really annoyed when he was hit by these 5 missiles. He was fighting in full swing in Bincheng, and there were even so many soldiers who were risking their lives just to complete their mission. And this would some people not only didn't help, but instead shot and threw missiles from behind. The difference between before and after is huge. Among the 3 possibilities Xia Bai speculated, the first 2 are difficult for Xia Bai to confirm for the time being, but he can investigate the situation on Anyang Mountain himself. Xia Bai actually knew that Anyang Mountain seemed to be prosperous now, but in fact there was an undercurrent inside. It was just that he did not show it under his absolute force. Many people had their own little thoughts. Huang Qiulan rushed over immediately and saw Xia Bai in the battleship. This pre-apocalyptic female boss can be said to be radiant these days. In terms of survival in the apocalypse, her ability seems to be limited, but she is very good at coordinating and managing people. It's also quite useful to me. Xia Bai and Huang Qiulan sat down in the battleship. He handed each other a cup of coffee and said, "It came quite quickly, Huang." Keulan smiled. Now the battleship is the focus of attention on Anyang Mountain. Xia Bai's dispatch of the battleship cannot be hidden. Therefore, she also knows what Xia Bai did before setting off, but she is also very smart and does not ask with this kind of problem. She knew exactly what she should do and what things she shouldn't touch. Xia Bai did not talk about the missiles at the first time. Instead, he briefly chatted with Huang Keulan before turning to ask about another matter, the selection of the second batch of members of our Anyang Mountain Guard. How's it going, Huang? Keulan smiled bitterly and said, you also know this. Although we wanted to contact Hao Zhuang and the others for the second batch of escort members, our core idea at the time was to delegate power to other ordinary survivors. But in the apocalypse you may know the situation better than I do. Ordinary survivors are said to be ordinary survivors, but they form gangs and are divided more clearly than any of us. The main ones fighting now are those who are well-founded, like Kao Deming and others. Xia Bai nodded. This was what he thought at the time. The core of Anyang Mountain was his own people, but power still had to be delegated to the outside world. Xia Bai only needs to ensure that he and the battleship have the absolute right to speak in the Anyang Mountain survivor base point, because Xia Bai's manpower is also limited, and his real focus is not on the Anyang Mountain survivor base, but on his battleship. The core members are all crew members on the future battleship, and he wants to stabilize Anyang Mountain. In this situation, the various survivor factions on Anyang Mountain must find their own positions and develop a sense of belonging and intimacy here to ensure that Anyang Mountain will not fall apart. However, this must be controlled to a certain degree, otherwise Anyang Mountain will become the next Changbai Mountain survivor base. Huang Keulan glanced at Xia Bai and said, my idea is to merge Xia and Kao Deming into our second escort team in Anyang Mountain. I want to divide them into two parts and take people out in shifts. Searching for supplies will balance the people on both sides and make it easier for Hao Zhuang to deal with it. Xia Bai nodded. In fact, Huang Keulan was better at this matter than him. He pondered for a moment and said, Xia and Kao Deming, apart from these two people, who has more influence among the ordinary survivors now? Huang Keulan was stunned for a moment, then reported a few names, and Lin Chenghua's name was also listed. Everyone knew that this guy was an agricultural expert, and everyone would probably rely on him after eating, so he became a famous figure inexplicably. Finally, Huang Keulan said, to be honest, these people may have some influence and manpower, but they are definitely not Xia and Kao Deming. Xia was originally a local snake in Anyang Mountain, and he had many people under his command, forming his own line. As for Kao Deming, from a personal point of view, he doesn't have much ability, but he is actually very good at being a good person. He has become one with the original survivors of Yuanping City early, and now he is even more popular among ordinary survivors. It has a very good reputation, but the main survivors below are just these two people. Xia Bai knew Kao Deming well. He didn't have much ability to do big things, but he was extremely cautious and slippery. He was also good at talking and building relationships, and he had a simple and honest face. The identity of the awakened person, and who he wants to establish a relationship with are all matters of minutes. This is considered a skill point. Listening to Huang Keulan's words, Xia Bai just nodded, thought for a while, and then said, you should help me keep an eye on these two people. Huang Keulan nodded. Xia Bai didn't say anything more, and didn't mention a word about his suspicions and missiles. He just said a few words casually and asked Huang Keulan to go back point. When the missiles came before, Kao Deming was on the battleship. He couldn't be stupid enough to blow himself up. Xia Bai pondered and planned to call Xia to chat. Of course, except for the big ones among these ordinary survivors, the following ordinary survivors are also suspected, and Huang Keulan cannot be trusted absolutely. Everyone has their own little thoughts, and it is useless to rashly trust them completely. However, before Xia Bai came to chat with Xia, news came from Yang and Li Jian Bai wanted to have a chat with Xia Bai. Please subscribe, vote monthly, and support me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190 Bite Back. Chapter 191 Bite Back. Although it was said that Xia Bai was looking for Xia Bai, when Xia Bai came over, what he saw was Yang Cheng's big face, which made Xia Bai a little confused. Yang Cheng's he was not polite and said when he came up, "You can do it. Stick a bamboo pole horizontally and carry the things away directly." The thing Yang Cheng's he mentioned was, of course, the alien object. Xia Bai only smiled slightly at this. He was not afraid of boiling water and said, "What are you talking about? I have just withdrawn from Bincheng. The things are only temporarily placed here with me. They will be returned to Changbei Mountain soon." Base, Yang Cheng's he glanced at him and said, "I heard about the missiles. Are you worried that, if you send things to the Changbei Mountain survivor base, you won't be able to leave?" When Xia Bai heard this, he was slightly stunned for a moment, then nodded very simply and said, "Yes, that's right." Yang Cheng's he twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "I don't know much about the situation on your side anyway. We are investigating the missile issue here. Other things may not matter, but when someone hits someone, they take out missiles. It's a bit too much, but we will definitely give you a result. As for that thing, when Yang Cheng's he said this, he paused slightly and said, "To be honest, it's useless for you to hold that thing. You don't know anything, and it's impossible to successfully crack it. It's useless to put it in your hands." Xia Bai just smiled and looked at Yang Cheng's he in front of him. How could the other party know the capabilities of his battleship? Although this thing occupies the title of an alien item, the technology involved is not that exaggerated. The military can crack it. His battleship is not to mention. Yang Cheng's he was overly worried. Of course, Xia Bai is not the kind of person who behaves when he gets an advantage. At this moment, he just smiled and looked like, "You can do whatever you say, but I just won't listen." Yang Cheng's he was also a little helpless. He said, "No matter what I say, it is actually of no use. Laoli and the others have realized it a long time ago. Therefore, he is too lazy to come to see you and ask me to come over and say hello directly to you." When Xia Bai heard this, he couldn't help but touch his nose. How could he hear the massive loss of his credibility from Yang Cheng's words? Yang Cheng's he continued, "As for the others, Captain Lu and his team members will be temporarily stationed in Anyang Mountain, and we will send a special team there immediately. You can hand over that thing without any worries." When Xia Bai heard this, he couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth slightly, but this was nothing to him. Anyway, he didn't want to monopolize the alien item. Until now, the military had not mentioned the true origin of the black cylinder to him. Xia Bai knew that if he handed it over directly to the military, he would probably not be able to do it until the aliens really arrived in a few years. Know what it is now. Xia Bai cut off whose hand and figured out what it was before handing it over to the military. At the moment, they were just delaying time. The longer they delayed, the better it would be for Xia Bai. Because the battleship is already in the process of cracking the alien black metal cylinder. By the time someone turns to the group, Xia Bai might have gotten what he wanted. After Yang Cheng's he said this series of words, he looked confused. But Xia Bai's expression seemed very relaxed. Of course, he has no reason to worry. Anyway, the things are here with him. If it were before the end of the world, he would not have the ability to compete with the military. But now the times are different, and the situation is naturally different. And that alien thing is not a fun thing. Xia Bai just wants to find out what it is, and when the time comes, he will hand it over to the military. Therefore, in his opinion, the military is a little too worried, and he has no monopoly at all. The thought of this thing. At this moment, Xia Bai thought for a moment and said, "Then my 100 missiles." Yang Cheng's he almost spit out a mouthful of old blood. In his opinion, Xia Bai had detained everything himself. The military had lost all its troops, but had not even seen the alien thing. How dare this person ask for missiles when he was at the Bincheng prison survivor base? Yang Cheng's he had already seen that Xia Bai was also a treacherous guy, but it was the first time that he discovered that this guy was so shameless. Xia Bai looked at Yang Cheng's his expression, but said with some vigilance, "You don't want to give it to me, right? Don't worry, I have no intention of keeping the #1 target item. Didn't I tell you the situation before? Bai Mountain has nothing to do with me. It's too dangerous. Someone hit me with a missile before. I know your good intentions, Mr. Lee and Brother Yang, but that doesn't mean that others at the Bai Mountain survivor base are also good people. You said I sent things there recklessly. Well, it would be bad if you fall into trouble. So you see, if it weren't for this situation, I wouldn't have delivered the things myself a long time ago. Don't worry, I will definitely give them up as soon as your people come. So, we, the People's Liberation Army, have a big family and a big business, so I would even give up 5 coins. Infrared tracking missiles, 100 missiles are nothing, right, Yang? Chengxi twitched his lips and looked at the person in front of him speechlessly. It was strange that he believed Xia Bai's lies. In his opinion, with the technology Xia Bai had, he couldn't even defeat the safety measures of that alien thing. Come on, that thing is just a big stone in Xia Bai's hand. I really don't know what its use is. Moreover, this guy actually had the nerve to carry those 100 missiles. The veins on Yang Cheng's forehead were rising. He stared at the person in front of him and wanted to curse, but Xia Bai said there was nothing to find fault with, and now he had a mean smile on his face. It was really hard for him to fall out. The most important thing is that the alien thing is still in Xia Bai's hands. Mr. Lee, we don't want to default on the debt, do we? Xia Bai couldn't imagine what Yang Chengxi was thinking at this moment. He asked clearly, this doesn't look good. I saw the Rambler in Bincheng. Yang Chengxi was slightly stunned when he heard this. His father was the boss of the Shengjing military region. Although he has now become one of the many factions in the Bai Mountain survivor base, the existence of the Ramblers, Yang Chengxi, of course it's impossible not to know. Before Yang Chengxi could respond, Xia Bai continued, when Mr. Lee told me before, he never mentioned that there was such a thing lying on Bincheng. I almost got caught. Even so, I still worked my ass off to bring back that #1 target, and now you want to default on the debt. Aren't you going to chill my heart, Yang? Chengxi was stunned. He thought to himself, he was the one who originally asked Xia Bai to punish him. How come the situation is reversed now? Thank you Chungwa 2002 for the 10,000 reward. Thank you all for your support. I owe you another update. Chapter 191 Don't you have a car? Chapter 192 Don't you have a car? Xia Bai and Yang Chengxi didn't talk for too long before he walked out. It was already past 11 o'clock in the evening. Before the end of the world, 11 o'clock was far from bedtime for most people. But with the advent of the end of the world, people have learned to go to bed early. Firstly, there is really nothing to do with going to bed late. Secondly, going to bed earlier also means that you can have a good mental state and reaction ability the next day, giving you a better survival advantage. This can be regarded as one of the few positive impacts that the end of the world has brought to mankind. Therefore, at this point in time, Anyang Mountain has become infinitely silent. In order to save power, except for the outer defense facilities and several internal reconnaissance towers, all other buildings have turned off the lights. The entire A City survivor base, all in absolute silence. However, as soon as Xia Bai came out, he saw Xia Bai first. This military lady had been waiting outside earlier. Her posture was meticulous and her expression was serious. She didn't look like she had been through anything. Before Xia Bai came out, she was looking at a guy sitting opposite her. That person is Yi Hanayu. The eldest sister of Chenghai High School is in stark contrast to Xia Bai. This guy was holding a cigarette in his mouth. He was sitting with one of his legs crossed. He looked at Xia Bai like a gangster. His aura was not weak at all, and there was even a subtle smell of gunpowder between the two of them flowing between. Xia Bai also knew that the reason why Yi Hanayu appeared here was Bailan's instruction, specifically for Yi Hanayu to come and watch Xia Bai. In this matter, Bailan also has her own considerations. Yi Hanayu is an awakened person and is very strong in martial arts. On the other hand, Yi Hanayu is full of ruffian spirit, and unlike a good girl like Bailan, she is able to act violently. The rolling person, let her look at Xia Bai. The hard one can be used, and the soft one can be a rogue. Even Xia Bai can't think of a more suitable person than Yi Hanayu. The actual situation was not as bad as Xia Bai and the others expected. Xia Bai seemed very restrained, and Yi Hanayu was not the kind of person who took the initiative to stir up trouble. Therefore, before Xia Bai came out, the two of them were silently talking to each other in a visual state point. When Xia Bai walked out of the room, Yi Hanai, who was the first to stand up, blew out smoke and said, "My mission is completed. I will get out of the way first and go back to sleep." As he said this inconspicuous guy left all at once, leaving the smell of cigarette smoke in the room. The corners of Xia Bai's mouth couldn't help but twitch as Yi Hanai's figure disappeared. Xia Bai quickly stood up. Of course she knew what Yi Hanai was doing here before, but she didn't say anything about it. Instead, she turned to Xia Bai and said, "Mr. Xia, what's the situation? You should also know that the latest mission that the Dawn team has received is to stay at the Anyang Mountain Survivor Base. It seems that, even if you don't invite us, we may have to harass you for a few days." Although Xia Bai was a little unhappy with Xia Bai's rogue behavior, she was a soldier after all, and her personal emotions rarely affected her words and actions. Therefore, although she felt that Xia Bai was a trash bastard at the moment, her expression but he was very calm and his words were very polite. Xia Bai nodded. Yang Chengxi had already greeted him before, and he was not surprised at this moment, saying, "Although I don't have much food and drink here, it is provided in unlimited quantities to our People's Liberation Army. You can eat and drink as much as you want. I asked Li Jinggyang to arrange a place for you to live. Have you made any arrangements?" Xia Bai was stunned for a moment. She found that the person in front of her was talking to her. No matter what he was talking about, the topic would naturally change to eating, drinking, and eating in just 2 sentences. She was a little speechless, but she still said, "Mr. Li arranged it for us, but our idea is that we are a defense force sent by the military and should not live with ordinary survivors. Moreover, target number 1 is now on the A City Mountain, and that thing is of great importance. So, I think we should." Before she could finish speaking, Xia Bai said, "Li Jinggyang made you live with ordinary survivors? What a stingy guy. Come on. I'll call him right now and arrange for you to go to Anyang, go to the mountain resort suite." As he said that, under Xia Bai's gaze, this guy actually took out a communication device from his arms and connected it to Li Jinggyang. In front of Xia Bai, he first scolded Li Jinggyang, and then after talking about the presidential suite, Li Jinggyang over there seemed submissive and claimed that he would come immediately to pick up Captain Xia Bai and go to the presidential suite. Xia Bai opened his mouth, watching Xia Bai finish the phone call, thinking, maybe this is the style of the Nalvorish, but she still took a deep breath and said, "Mister, after all, we sacrificed too many comrades in order to bring that thing back." Xia Bai looked at the person in front of him. After a moment of silence, his expression finally straightened slightly and said, "I can understand your thoughts, but in my opinion, your worries are overblown. You should also clearly, as an ordinary person like me, I don't even know what that key item is, let alone what I can do to it, or you are worried that I want to give it to someone else, but you are really worrying too much, not to mention that I have received a lot of help from the military from Bingchengta today, just for Hu Jianming." Xia Bai paused for a moment when he mentioned the name Hu Jianming, and then said, "I can't do anything with this thing. I'm a speculator, but in this kind of thing, I don't have any opportunities to invest in. I won't take any chances. You may think that I'm deceiving you or interrupting you by asking you to go to the presidential suite, but my idea is that I really hope that you can take a break. You have already lost money today. Too many. Life is not easy. Captain Lu, please take a rest. We were originally there to help today, but actually we didn't do much. Now we can only provide a place for you to take a rest." Xia Bai looked very sincere, and Xia Bai couldn't help but froze slightly. She looked at the man in front of her, whom she had regarded as an Avorish just a second ago, and her expression seemed a little complicated. Thinking about what he just said. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please collect it. Chapter 192. Even cells can fly into the sky. Chapter 193. A cell can fly into the sky. In fact, Xia Bai could probably imagine the reason why the military seemed so nervous. After all, that thing was an extraterrestrial item, and it was of great importance. Moreover, the factional struggle within the Changbei Mountain Survivor Base was getting more and more serious. There was a danger signal, and Xia Bai and the others were also worried that things would change later, so it was understandable that they behaved a bit excessively. But both sides undoubtedly left some room. Xia Bai was playing rogue, while the military was following a step-by-step approach. Sooner or later, things would have to be handed over to Changbai Mountain. It was just a delay. It was getting late, but Xia Bai did not return to his house in Anyang Mountain, but returned directly to the battleship. The alien thing is of great importance. Although Xia Bai and Xia Bai spoke lightly, he himself was worried about something happening, so he planned to stay overnight in the battleship. After the analysis is completed tomorrow, he could get it done as soon as possible. Know what this thing is on the other side. Xia Bai stayed in the presidential suite. Before joining the army, Xia Bai came from an ordinary family and could not afford to live in a presidential suite. After joining the army, although she gradually became an elite in the army and even became the captain of the Dawn team, her combat team was not that kind of spy. Agents have a very hard life on weekdays. In most cases, just having a bed to sleep at night is a good treatment. Therefore, Xia Bai did not expect that he would be able to live in a hotel suite of this size in the apocalypse. Xia Bai even laughed at himself. This is really the end of the world. Sows can fly into the sky. She is no longer the age of a little girl, and the luxury and shabby place where she lives means nothing to her. However, the conditions here are quite good. At least there are hot baths, food, and drink. There are not many people in the Anyang Mountain survivor base, but a lot of supplies have been looted recently, so there is really no shortage of food and drink. In terms of power supply, Anyang Mountain Resort, the meteorological observatory behind it, and even the air raid shelters all have their own power generation. Xia Bai only needs to reconfigure them to make them operate normally. With battleships around, some rare fuels are not a problem. Moreover, in addition, Xia Bai has also produced several battleships. The produced solar aggregation generator provides independent power supply for certain important locations, while also reducing the burden on the entire Anyang Mountain power supply system. Therefore, at the moment, theoretically speaking, the daily power supply of Anyang Mountain is enough to ensure the operation of the entire Anyang Mountain, not to mention water heaters, and so on. Many people's mobile phones have been recharged and can be used. However, with the advent of the apocalypse, most of the base stations have been damaged, and the communication functions of the mobile phones have been basically scrapped. In comparison, in terms of power supply, Anyang Mountain is definitely better than the current Changbai Mountain, because there are too many survivors in the Changbai Mountain survivor base, and there are too many expansion buildings. The power supply is instead supplied inside Changbai Mountain. There are a large number of military facilities and scientific research projects require power supply. Therefore, in Changbai Mountain, although the food problem has been solved by the military, in terms of power supply, most areas have limited power supply or even no power at all. All in all, even Xia Bai had to admit that Xia Bai did have the confidence to become a Nalvorish. The utilization rate of many civilian facilities on Anyang Mountain was extremely high, and the living environment here was even better than that at the Changbai Mountain survivor base. This is actually related to Xia Bai's own philosophy. His idea has always been, don't worry about whether you can defeat zombies, you should live a good life in the apocalypse. Therefore, while building walls, collecting supplies, and farming, he also tried his best to it is possible to restore the operation of a large number of pre-apocalyptic living infrastructure on Anyang Mountain. These things may not seem to be of any help to survivors against zombies, but they can make people's lives in Anyang Mountain more comfortable. Moreover, here, not every survivor can find what they should do. There are always some idle personnel. Let them restore the basic living facilities on Anyang Mountain. It can be considered that the people are fully utilized, and the progress of important work will not be delayed. Xia Bai wanted to build Anyang Mountain and the area around it into a zombie-free safe zone, or even a city in the rear to resist alien creatures in the future. The plan from the beginning was to make this place truly a city in the apocalypse. It has the living standard of human civilization, and also has the ability to survive on its own. Point of course, Xia Bai and the Anyang Mountain Survivor Base are still far from achieving this goal, but now in Xia Bai's view, there is already a little bit of a prototype here. Point in particular, Xia Bai is from the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base. She knows very well what the current state of Changbai Mountain is. The people at the top are fine, but there are too many survivors below, making the living environment extremely bad. Point. If Xia Bai was an ordinary survivor, she would choose to live in a place like the Anyang Mountain Survivor Base, if safety was not considered. Point. However, although there are Xia Bai's weird warships in Anyang Mountain, in Xia Bai's view, it is still not as safe as the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base with a large number of troops. Xia Bai simply washed up and took a hot bath before sitting down on the edge of the soft bed. Point. She sat here blankly for a long time, staring at her hands in a daze. Point. Only at this time, in the dead of night, and with no new tasks, could she start to think about it. How many people did they die? How many people are left in such a team that shares life and death? Many of those people had fought alongside her even before the end of the world. But everyone says that soldiers have taken life and death lightly, but when the number of familiar people around you gradually decreases, no one can truly remain calm. Point. Xia Bai stared at the palm of his hand in a daze for a long time. Point. Sometimes she thought it would be nice to have endless tasks so that she wouldn't have time to think about them. Point. There is no time to think about these deaths. Xia Bai licked her lips, turned off the light, lay down on the bed, and wrapped herself tightly in the quilt. Maybe it was because the bed here was too soft. She didn't fall asleep for a long time, just in a state of sleep. In the state. Point. She only felt that the bed under her body was like a puddle of mud. She was trapped in it, sinking deeper and deeper, and finally fell into a deep and unconscious sleep. Point. Thanks to book friend 160,916,200,631,272 for the 10,000 rewards. The 12th helmsman of this book was born. Thank you, really thank you. Thank you all for your support. I already owe 6 updates, and I will definitely make up for them all by the 10th at the latest. There is still someone for Herbal Tea Pindi Chapter 193 Module. Chapter 194 Module. When Xia Bai woke up again, it was already bright outside. Point. He simply washed up, and by the afternoon, the deconstruction of item number 1 was completely completed. Point. Yang Chengzi said that Xia Bai had no ability to crack the security system of this thing, but in fact, he successfully completed the process in only 17 hours. That thing slowly opened in Xia Bai's battleship. Point. The black metal cylinder made a soft click sound, and then the front and rear sections separated from the middle, revealing a sophisticated mechanical device. Point. This thing is still in the very small fully enclosed laboratory of the battleship at this moment. This laboratory is half embedded in the armor of the main wall of the battleship, and is only a few square meters. It seems a bit reluctant to put down this alien object. For normal humans, this is just a slightly larger showcase. Point. The size of the 4th level battleship is still too small, and the laboratory has just appeared, and is not very functional. Therefore, this scale is considered normal. Point. Xia Bai, on the other hand, stood outside and observed through the images brought out by Alpha, in order to avoid the impact that the radiation or viruses that the thing might carry might have on Xia Bai. Point. But in fact, Xia Bai was overly worried. According to the test of the laboratory's internal system, this thing did not carry any unknown viruses, and the external radiation was within the safe limit of being harmless to humans. As the security system of this thing was cracked, the laboratory directly began to scan the entire internal system of this thing for more in-depth deconstruction and analysis, and when this thing was slowly opened, and then under the control of Alpha, its internal-external interaction system was activated. Then, under Xia Bai's gaze, some components of this thing gradually lit up, and then, from it, a beam of light was shot. Point. There is no alarm on the battleship, and this beam is not a blow, but a holographic projection, and the projection appears to be very smart. At first, its projection size should be very large, and it cannot be fitted in the laboratory. Its projection changed adaptively in an instant, shrinking extremely to the point where it can be observed in the laboratory. Point. And the picture projected by this thing turned out to be the Earth point, a holographic Earth, and in this holographic picture, streaks of light are constantly sweeping across it, sweeping across the Earth in a few seconds at this time. Alpha's voice sounded. It has been confirmed that the current item is transmitting signals at a fixed frequency to an unknown location in deep space. The signal receiving end is too far away. With the current system of the battleship, it is impossible to accurately locate it, or it can be feedback tracking of signals in the same direction to determine the location of the unknown signal receiving end. Xia Bai frowned slightly. He looked at the holographic projection of the Earth in front of him and said, "If we locate it, will they also find us?" Listening to Alpha's words and looking at such a thing, Xia Bai actually already knew who the unknown signal receiver was. "That's an alien creature," Alpha said. "With the warship's current level and signal encryption capabilities, there is no possibility of transmitting positioning signals without being discovered." Xia Bai, Alpha, obviously couldn't understand the meaning of Xia Bai's silence at this moment, so he just asked again, "Are you trying to confirm the location of the unknown signal?" Xia Bai shook his head and said, "No, not sure. 80% of the signal receiving end is a group of alien creatures that launched an attack on the Earth. With the ability of the Xia Bai battleship, even if it locates the opponent's position in space, can it defeat it? On the contrary, it may alert the enemy point, and the black signal generator in front of him is emitting signals into deep space, which means that the situation may be as Xia Bai had guessed before. At this time, alien creatures may not have come to the Earth at all. For them, the Earth and human civilization on the Earth may be just like a bunch of ants. They want to get rid of the ant nest. What they are doing now may just throw some heavy object to smash the ant nest first. The ants are all smashed to pieces, and it may take a lot of time for them to actually walk over and kill all the ants. In fact, they may even die in the blink of an eye because of other more important things more important than the ants. Forgot about the anthill point, of course. It is impossible to forget, because as a reborn person, Xia Bai knows very well that alien creatures will definitely come to the Earth point, but now, Xia Bai can confirm that alien creatures should no longer be on the Earth. If they are really hiding in a corner of the Earth, they are observing human beings struggle and life and death struggle in the apocalypse with some evil taste. There is no need for this thing to send signals to deep space. The alien creatures may be on the way, or they may be busy with other things. They will only rush to finish the day. After thinking of the situation here in 5 years, however, this is good news for Xia Bai. Before, he had also worried that with the development of his battleship, if alien creatures were really hiding in a corner of the Earth to observe, they would certainly not interfere when Xia Bai's battleship was in its early stages of growth. But once Xia Bai's battleship, the warships have also grown up. And they will definitely stop the development of the warships with absolutely thunderous means. No matter how powerful Xia Bai's battleship is, before he truly grows up, the alien creature must have the ability to kill him with one hand. Therefore, Xia Bai also thought about it. When the battleship reaches level 5, he will have to restrain his behavior, and as a result, the speed at which he accumulates energy points will undoubtedly slow down. But right now, since extraterrestrial creatures are still many light years away, then, Xia Bai slowly breathed a sigh of relief. He frowned and looked at the thing in front of him, and the projected Earth, and said, "Is this thing, is it just a signal transmitter?" Alpha responded immediately, "It is indeed a signal transmitter, but it is in a system. This is some kind of feedback system for global ecological monitoring of the Earth. In other locations on the Earth, there should be other something similar, but what we currently have is just a feedback module with an error summary." Xia Bai looked at the streaks of light that were constantly passing over the projected Earth in front of him. He was silent for a moment and said, "You mean, this thing is monitoring the ecosystem on the Earth? Then is it monitoring humans? Also, what the hell is the error reporting module? Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation." Chapter 194, What do I need you for? Chapter 195, What do I need you for? Although the level of intelligence is not high, Alpha's response speed is very fast. It responded immediately. Judging from the shallow information currently obtained from the error reporting module, this system is mainly for monitoring the ecological environment. Theoretically speaking, the content of monitoring the ecological environment should include atmospheric composition, global temperature, etc. The part that monitors humans only accounts for a small part of the entire system, and will be classified as monitoring within the entire biological system of plants and animals. But because we cannot decipher their encoding and message text, we cannot obtain any more effective deterministic information. Looks like aliens value ant nests more than ants. Xia Bai frowned slightly. At this time, Alpha said, there are multiple encryption items inside this module. Do you want to crack it? Cracking may trigger a security alarm for the entire system, where the module is located, and then cause the unknown signal receiving end in deep space to discover us. Alpha seemed to have learned to be smart. From Xia Bai's previous failure to trace the signal receiving end, he realized that Xia Bai did not want to be discovered by alien creatures in deep space, and then took the initiative to remind him. Xia Bai shook his head slightly. He was only at the 4th level of the battleship at the moment, and knew very little about alien creatures. If he were to scare the enemy away and kill them directly with a jump, Xia Bai would have nothing to do. Xia Bai said, what about the error reporting module? What the hell is it? Since this is a monitoring system, can we use the information it collects to find out what exactly they are monitoring? Alpha continued, this is an error reporting module, that is, the internal problems, program problems and unknown problems of the entire system will be fed back to this signal transmitter. All the signals summarized and transmitted by it are error signals, but it's the content and encoding method are not any existing on Earth, and the battleship's level is too low to fully analyze and decipher it. The corner of Xia Bai's mouth twitched and said, in other words, the thing we got is one of the modules of the global monitoring system for alien creatures, but this thing is a module specifically designed to report errors, and even if it's full of errors and useless information and we don't even know what it is. Only then did Xia Bai realize what Alpha meant by theoretically just now. What Alpha said was theoretically what the ecological monitoring system should do, not what it actually does. Conclusions drawn from the information obtained on this module. I'll go. Xia Bai really wanted to vomit. What use do I need from you? But he also knew that the battleship was only level 4 and the artificial intelligence system had just been produced. The technology carried by the battleship itself might have been able to roam the Earth, but for higher level alien creatures and civilizations, Xia Bai, a level 4 class battleships cannot even compete with them, let alone surpass them technically. The battleship has only just reached level 4, and its level is still too low. Upgrading and improving yourself is the most critical thing. Xia Bai exhaled and said. Then although we have found this thing, it is actually of no use. He couldn't crack this thing at a deeper level, nor could he decode the information and programs it carried. In addition to knowing what it did, Xia Bai really didn't know what use it had. Of course, through this thing, Xia Bai also figured out that alien creatures are still far away from the Earth at the moment. This point alone is actually very important. Alpha did not respond immediately this time, but after being silent for a long time, he said, theoretically, we can use the signal source and the current module to locate the system in which it is located, using the information sent to it when other modules report an error, and then locating the location of other modules. Maybe, possibly, probably, theoretically, there will be other gains. As an AI program with a low level of intelligence, Alpha's words are extremely vague when it comes to things that it cannot determine. Xia Bai took a deep breath. Although Alpha could not crack the internal system and information of this thing, this system was obviously not an offensive weapon for spreading viruses. Judging from the current information, this system was some kind of functional facility. Moreover, if it is really as Alpha said, what it monitors is the ecological environment of the Earth, and the humans infected by the virus are only a part of the larger surface it monitors. So, what exactly is a system like this that alien creatures put in? What are you doing? Xia Bai didn't know, but he realized that this thing might be related to the real purpose of alien creatures' attack on the Earth. The real reason why alien creatures travel thousands of miles away from nowhere in deep space to launch such a biochemical attack on the Earth. Xia Bai couldn't help but take a deep breath. When he thought about this, he asked Alpha to find a way to find the location of other modules in the system. According to Alpha, this system is deployed globally, and most of them should have concealment measures. They cannot be found through external scanning. They can only be found through information transmission within the system. Only through the network can we locate each other. The current technology of battleships is considered very powerful, reaching the top level of the Earth, and not far behind the military. However, even if the battleship knows that such a system exists on the Earth, it cannot find its location, let alone precise positioning. Still requires the assistance of the internal modules of this system. It is very powerful for the military to find this thing. Xia Bai directly asked Alpha to start cooperating with the main system of the battleship, to start locating the positions of other modules related to this module. This also takes a certain amount of time for the battleship, while Xia Bai asked Alpha to build a network diagram for future convenience. After all, Xia Bai can't keep this thing here. Sooner or later, it will be handed over to the military. The military must also know these things. Xia Bai will keep it strong, and it will be of no benefit to the overall situation. At the same time, Xia Bai also hopes to understand the meaning of the existence of this system. He also wants to find out what the alien creatures want to do on Earth. As the saying goes, only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you be invincible in 100 battles. The more he understands about the needs, civilization, etc. of alien creatures, the better he will be when he confronts alien creatures in the future. There is no doubt that he will become more calm. It is now 2019, and alien creatures will arrive in 2022. It takes a long time, but there is not much time for people to grow. Xia Bai knew clearly that when alien creatures arrived, the Earth would have only two outcomes: complete defeat and death, or victory in battle. Xia Bai didn't want to be defeated or die, so he had to work hard for the future war. Chapter 195. Damn it. Chapter 197. Damn it. Update 1. Xiao Zhiguo looked very confident. His confidence seemed to be directly proportional to his body shape. He looked at Xia Bai in front of him with a serious expression, but his eyes contained a look that encouraged the younger generation to make the right choice. Xia Bai took a breath and squinted at the person in front of him. After a long moment of silence, he said, "Okay, then Li Jingyang. Take our secretary Xiao, no, deputy director Xiao, back to rest first. I will definitely deliver the things myself when I get back, Xiao." Zhiguo frowned slightly. Although Xia Bai was smiling broadly, he felt that something was slightly wrong at this moment. However, according to the practice before the end of the world, when officials from big cities like me go to small rural areas, no matter what they do, it is indispensable to arrange good food and drink first. Although the situation has changed since the end of the world, to be honest, this is Xiao Zhiguo's first overseas assignment. He looked at Xia Bai in front of him and thought, is this young man so good? But Xiao Zhiguo still felt that something was not quite right. So after listening to Xia Bai's words, although he had some thoughts in his heart that he wanted to dominate and enjoy here, he did not act immediately, but his eyes couldn't help but glance behind Xia Bai. Behind Xia Bai, standing were his two awakened ones, Baolan and Yi Hanyu. In addition to being awakened, these two people are both serious beauties. Baolan is quiet and cold, while Yi Hanyu is carefree and ruffian. Standing together, these two people have completely opposite temperaments. Take a second look. Xia Bai followed Xiao Zhiguo's gaze, thought for a while, and said, "Forget it, Hanyu. You should take Deputy Director Xiao to rest and take good care of me." Yi Hanyu was smoking in the back. Hearing this, he was slightly stunned and looked at Xia Bai, who winked at him. Xia Bai then rushed towards Xiao Zhiguo and said with a smile, "This is the awakened one. Let her accompany you. This is definitely worthy of your specifications, Deputy Director Xiao." But Xiao Zhiguo's eyes narrowed slightly. At this moment, he believed Xia Bai's sincerity, sending out all the beauties of the awakened. What is this if not sincerity? At that moment, under the leadership of Yi Hanyu, who was carelessly smoking a cigarette, Deputy Director Xiao twisted his big butt and followed Yi Hanyu awkwardly. Behind him, the two officers glanced at Xia Bai as if they wanted to say something, but after hesitating for a moment, they followed him. On the other side, Zhu Yiman and the two non-military people did not move, nor did they come up immediately. When Xiao Ziglo walked away. Bailan frowned slightly and said, "What's the situation? This guy is such a fool, and you are still so polite." Xia Bai smiled and said, "I just like this kind of person. If we just throw him in a room and don't let him come out, what else can he do to us?" When Bailan heard this, he was stunned for a moment. This is actually Xia Bai's idea. For a person like Xiao Ziglo, he has no need for you to bully me. If you bully me, I will put you in any corner and ignore you. What about you? Nothing can be done. It depends on who else you can fight with. Xia Bai did not confront Xiao Ziglo head on and adopted the marshmallow policy to appease him first. From now on, no matter what you want to do, don't even think about achieving success. What kind of goods came? It saved Xia Bai a lot of trouble. However, looking at the expressions of the two officers, I'm afraid it was these two people who really wanted the number one item. But why didn't they immediately? When it comes to this matter, Xia Bai doesn't know. As for Yi Hanyu is an awakened person. It would be strange if he could suffer a loss from such a person. Bailan also understood what Xia Bai meant, but still frowned, glanced at Zuyman and others who followed Xiao Ziglo and the others as they left, and slowly walked up and said, "I'd better go over there and have a look. Don't let Yi Hanyu give others a good impression." Although what Xiao Ziglo said is not pleasant to listen to, it still makes sense. If someone comes from Changbei Mountain, if we beat him to death, the situation will be embarrassing. Xia Bai was not worried about the seriousness of Yi Hanyu's attack, although the girl seemed carefree in the past. In fact, she knew better than anyone else. But Xia Bai didn't stop him, but let Bailan go in a hurry. He turned around and faced Zuyman, who was walking towards him over there. Zuyman was, as always, dressed very gorgeously in the apocalypse, with makeup on her face, as if she was attending a red carpet show at a film and television festival before the apocalypse. With a faint confident smile on her lips, she walked step by step in front of Xia Bai. Jenan smiled and said, "Mr. Xia, long time no see." When she said this, she paused slightly and said, "You saved my life last time in the granary. Haven't I thanked you properly?" Xia Bai felt a little confused after hearing these words. "Huh? When did I save you?" Back in Shuangfeng town, Xia Bai killed the extreme mutant and saved Zuyman from the extreme mutant's mouth. But at that time, Xia Bai's thoughts were all about killing the mutant to grab food. He didn't even remember who he saved, so he was really confused at the moment. Xia Bai thought to himself, what on earth is this guy here for? After all, he is a big star, and he can barely do any tricks, right? Zuyman looked a little embarrassed. Looking at the look on Xia Bai's face now, she couldn't help but remember that when she was in Shuangfeng town, Xia Bai was also indifferent to her at this moment. Xia Bai asked, "By the way, are you from the Zhu group?" Zuyman was stunned for a moment, nodded, and said, "That's right." Xia Bai said, "I heard that the Zhu group is cooperating with the 13 Kings." Zuyman said, "Cooperation is cooperation, but, okay." Xia Bai interrupted Zuyman before she could finish her words, looked directly at the other man beside her, and said, "Then you are." Zuyman was confused. What does good mean? Why is it fine? Walking side by side with the 13 Kings was a handsome young man who also looked very confident and said, "I'm Mahanbo, from the Scientific Research Center." When Xia Bai heard the word Scientific Research Center, he nodded, said okay again, and directly interrupted the other party's words. That Mahanbo was a little unhappy when Xia Bai interrupted him. When Zuyman looked at Xia Bai in front of him, he had a vague premonition of something bad. At this moment, Xia Bai turned directly to look at Hao Zuang, Li Jinggang and others who were following behind him, and said, "Did I tell you, when I arrested that so and so of the 13 Kings last time, that when I meet people from this sect in the future, just capture them and keep them as hostages in exchange for ransom?" Hao Zuang and Li Jinggang looked at each other, both a little confused. Xia Bai said directly, "What are you still doing? There are 2 people who came to your door today. Why don't you catch them both quickly? Damn it. Get moving." Thank you to Yu Wei Feng for the 10,000 reward, the first elder boss of this book. Thank you. Some book friends said that there were more updates after the book was put on the shelves than before it was put on the shelves. It is unfair. Before it was put on the shelves, there were 2 updates every day, and it is the same now. There were no major updates, mainly because I couldn't take any time off during the national day. Everyone knows that herbal tea coding is slow, and I also wanted to see what it would be like to have such a stable 2-day subscription. I also heard that it would cost too much to update. If there are too many, no one will read them. Kidian Data Network said that my subscriptions are 430, but I'm only over 300 now. I hope everyone can continue to support the genuine version. A day's subscription only costs a few cents. I love this book and herbal tea. Talking about it is very important support point. I wrote a small paragraph of irrelevant words in the main text, mainly because it is placed in that position, so that pirates can copy it, but it may cost everyone an extra penny. Herbal tea would like to apologize in advance. In addition, Herbal tea would like to thank everyone here. My son's support. Today I will make up for everything I owe. I will start typing from now on, write and publish 1 chapter, and I will not leave the table until I finish. Thank you to all the brothers who support the original version and vote for the Herbal tea subscription. Chapter 196 Bandit Style. Chapter 198 Bandit Style. Second update. Xia Bai is a little blue and thin. In other words, she was a little confused at the moment. She had heard that Xia Bai had detained someone from the 13 Kings. She had also heard that Xia Bai had said that the 13 Kings would arrest one by one. But she, including the people behind her, never thought that what Xia Bai said was true. In the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base, the relationship between the Zoo Group, the 13 Kings and the Scientific Research Center is no longer a secret. As the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base was established over time, half minimum Jianhua survivors like the 13 Kings, even ordinary survivors, are aware of the power of the invaders. Xia Bai's purpose in coming to Anyang Mountain this time was actually not to find trouble, let alone to redeem the 13 Kings. She came hand in hand with people from the Scientific Research Center, and she actually wanted to have a good relationship with Xia Bai, and even abandoned the 13 Kings. The current situation is changing. With the sudden rise of Anyang Mountain and the battleship controlled by Xia Bai, through the data detected by Xia Bai several times before, and even in the Bincheng area, the Scientific Research Center, the level of interest in Xia Bai and his battleships has increased by more than 1 level. The Zoo Group was the first to realize that Xia Bai was more powerful than the 13 Kings, and had unlimited possibilities among the local survivors. In Changbai Mountain, the 13 Kings are indeed very powerful, but in the face of the military and even Xia Bai's level of armed force, the 13 Kings are not enough. How can the awakened one break through the shield of Xia Bai's battleship? If we can unite with Xia Bai and let Xia Bai replace the 13 Kings' current position in the Changbai Mountain Survivor Base, and become a new ally with the Zoo Group and the Scientific Research Center. From a close perspective, although the benefits are not as great as the immediate one, the 3 Kings are so big, but in the long run, if they can form an alliance with Xia Bai, the Zoo Group will be equivalent to having a large survivor base like Anyang Mountain as its backing in the future. With the support of the Scientific Research Center and the Zoo Group, Anyang Mountain may not be able to become the second Changbai Mountain in the 3 eastern provinces. Of course, it may be an exaggeration to say this, but the meaning is similar. If it unites with the 13 Kings, at most it will survive in Changbai Mountain. However, if he can unite with Xia Bai, he can not only get help from Anyang Mountain, but also attract Xia Bai to settle in the survivor base of Changbai Mountain, which can also have the effect of joining forces with the 13 Kings. If everything goes well, the Scientific Research Center can even obtain a series of key technologies on the Xia Bai battleship. Moreover, Xia Bai has always had a cooperative and alliance relationship with Li Jianbei's faction. The establishment of an alliance between the Zoo Group, the Scientific Research Center and Xia Bai will also ease the conflict between the two to a certain extent. The Scientific Research Center decided to do this. This is probably because the relationship between the end of the world and alien creatures is becoming more and more obvious. Although the people in the Scientific Research Center have their own small thoughts, some of the top leaders are still very clear-minded and know that if alien creatures really exist, internal friction and fighting are pointless this time. People from the government led the team, and people from the Scientific Research Center and the military followed. This was actually a signal This was an opportunity for the multi-party alliance intention in the Changbai Mountain Survivor base. Point: there is no absolute friendship in this world, but there is an absolute relationship of interest. Point: the more turbulent the era, the faster all these changes, of course. Once this alliance is established, Xia Bai is actually the one who suffers the most. He has to help others, and at worst, he may be extorted for his technology. At most, he can get assistance from the military and Changbai Mountain, and those assistants. To be honest, Xia Bai really doesn't need it. He has Shengjing City on his back. With the current capabilities of the 4th level battleship, he is simply getting everything he wants from Shengjing City. If he wants anything, he can just go to the city to find it. His own fields, a batch of things are also being planted. As for weapons, at the speed at which he is harvesting energy points, it's really not a problem. Point: however, for this trip to Anyang Mountain, Xu Yiman came with unlimited confidence. She had been in contact with Xia Bai before, and knew what kind of person he was. There was no reason why she could not succeed with her pretty face, but what she never expected was that, just after she came here, she had been rejected twice, and now she would be forced to be locked up directly. There is something wrong with the development of this situation, and Xia Bai, this guy, was expressionlessly watching Xu Yiman being taken away by Li Jinggyang. To be honest, although Xu Yiman was a big star, he really didn't think there was anything interesting about this girl's smile. Point: after all, some time ago, that girl Yi Hanayu was making fun of herself every day in order to be able to drive a battleship to the sky. Point: although Yi Hanayu is not a star, she is still a natural beautiful girl. As long as she doesn't speak, her smile is still very healing. Point: in fact, seeing Xu Yiman and Ma Hongbo, two people from the zoo group and the scientific research center, Xia Bai roughly guessed the reason why the composition of the special team this time was so strange. Point: relaxing the relationship with the scientific research center now is indeed a good choice for the current turbulent situation in the Changbai Mountain Survivor base, but Xia Bai knows better, that he currently lacks strength and rashly runs out to this alliance. Or that alliance, which will only make himself just the next 13 kings. To say it is an alliance is just a nice way of saying it, but in fact it is just a vassal relationship. Point: Xia Bai is not so selfless yet. Point: he will truly intervene in the forces of the Changbai Mountain Survivor base, but not in this way. Instead, in the future, when he truly has the confidence and power, he will intervene in the Changbai Mountain Survivor base in a truly reciprocal relationship. Point: in addition, Xia Bai has another consideration. Your scientific research center had a fierce fight with the 13 kings 2 days ago to deal with me, and even sent that guy Wen Wei to come over and say that my battleship was stolen. I'm used to you. You just want to make peace with each other. Don't you think that's too beautiful? Therefore, Xia Bai directly ignored Xu Yiman's resentful look and what she said. Wait a minute, Mr. Xia, I have something very important to tell you. If you listen, you may change your mind. Holding up his hands, he turned his head and walked in the other direction. Point: but when Xu Yiman and Ma Hongbo were imprisoned, the very handsome young man from the scientific research center said angrily, "This is a bandit, and it is a bandit style." Xu Yiman squatted in the corner, looking sideways at the person in front of him, and said, "You are so powerful, why didn't you say a word just now?" Ma Hongbo glanced at her and said, "What if you talk randomly and get shot to death? When dealing with bandits, you need to think long and hard." Xu Yiman looked at this guy, sighed heavily and fell silent. Point: thanks to book friend 8,768,767 for your support. After many days, I finally added it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197: The Drone Takes Shape. Chapter 199: The Drone Takes Shape. Update 3, March 26, 2019. Xia Bai is looking up at the sky. This is another bright day, of course. Strictly speaking, for most people on Anyang Mountain, this is a bright day. Xiao Ziguo had been imprisoned for a few days. Although he was provided with good food and drink, he was not a fool. His attempt to attack Yi Hanayu failed the night before. However, under Xia Bai's supervision, even the food he had on him was the satellite phones were all taken away, and there was nothing that could be done. The same was true for Zuyiman and Mahanbo. They were locked up in the hotel for 2 days. Xia Bai wanted to make these two guys suffer, so he directly gave the man. Luo Yuda from 13 Kings was imprisoned together. I heard that these 3 people were fighting each other when they met, and Luo Yuda was electrocuted within 2 minutes. In short, it was very lively and a complete mess all in all. This group of people couldn't see Xia Bai at all right now. Even if they wanted to say something, they had no room to speak. They were feeling very aggrieved and depressed all day long. However, Xia Bai did not have too much control over the 2 military personnel who were led by Zhao Ziguo. As Xia Bai expected, these 2 people in the team this time were the ones who knew their first purpose best. They had been chasing Xia Bai to inquire about the number 1 target item. Xia Bai had only one plan for this. Teng. You can't do anything to me, and I won't give you anything. This is Xia Bai's tactic at the moment. All in all, it's fine if you're depressed, and I'm not depressed. Battleship and Alpha's positioning and retrieval speed for other alien modules was slower than Xia Bai imagined. The technology of that thing was above Earth's, and the encoding method and logic were different from Earth's. Alpha also had to avoid it is possible to trigger its internal warning device, so the time required to locate several other modules that have interacted with this error module is quite long. Therefore, Xia Bai can only delay for now. On this day, the sun was shining brightly, and Xia Bai stood at the meteorological tower behind Anyang Mountain and squinted at the sky. Because at this moment, there were sharp sounds of breaking through the sky. Xia Bai squinted his eyes and looked up at the sky, seeing black streamlined drones flying across the sky. That is a Type I swarm drone built by the battleship. Under the control of Alpha, it is crisscrossing the sky. Yesterday, the 10th drone was finally manufactured, and Xia Bai's small-scale combat group was finally organized. This thing flies extremely fast and is small, so it doesn't carry a lot of ammunition, but this thing it can be filled with explosives and used as an explosive drone for terrorist attacks to directly bomb certain target locations. Of course, the price of this drone is not low. Xia Bai is not rich enough to use this thing for targeted bombing. With this thing, Anyang Mountain's air defense force will be strengthened in a straight line. Just now, under Xia Bai's instructions, this drone swarm was operated by Alpha and directly attacked, bombing directly from the sky and flattening a group of slaves. A group of zombies staggered towards Shengjing City, testing their combat effectiveness for the first time. Under Alpha's control, these 10 drones can be extremely flexible and powerful. Of course, most of Alpha's computing power is currently on the alien number 1 item. The intensity of controlling the drones at this time is of course not that precise. However, Xia Bai felt a little happy when he looked at the group of drones flying in the sky. He even imagined that in the future, fighter planes would cover the sky in the sun like in the movies. But, in real space combat, this swarming small fighter mode seems to be of little use. It has an innate war advantage when fighting and crushing low-end enemies, but if the enemy you are fighting against is far stronger than yourself, this thing will have no meaning and value in its existence. Therefore, although Xia Bai fantasized about the scene of such drones covering the sky, in reality, he would not create so many. He would invest more energy points in the upgrading of battleships. On top of the manufacturing of high-end weapons. He didn't know what the alien creature's spacecraft looked like, but there was nothing wrong with the weapons being manufactured with strong firepower, functionality, and accuracy. Xia Bai watched the drone parade in the sky for a while, then took a long breath and let the drone return to the air raid shelter in the back mountain. He walked down, thinking it was time to go out. Hunted a wave of zombies in the past few days, although Alpha and the main computers of the battleship were busy looking for the locations of other alien modules. This did not affect Xia Bai's hunting of zombies. At most, when Xia Bai took action, the battleship could not provide any information. He just provides too much auxiliary help. Anyway, Xia Bai did it all by himself at levels 1, 2, and 3, so it didn't matter now. Moreover, when hunting zombies in Shengjing City, he basically only had to keep the battleship at a certain height in the sky and pour down firepower only in certain specific areas. Xia Bai would drop things like white phosphorus bombs and incendiary bombs. Although these things are incredibly lethal to zombies, they also cause damage to the surrounding environment. There is no fire brigade in the city now. Shengjing City is not, however. Xia Bai's leveling field is also Xia Bai's Anyang Mountain's warehouse of materials. Now Anyang Mountain is still in the growth stage and has not yet reached the point of self-sufficiency. Although several key production lines are being established among them, the material supply of Shengjing City is still very important in Anyang Mountain Point. Moreover, if Shengjing City is really burned down, it will only bring disadvantages to Xia Bai, Anyang Mountain, and ordinary survivors. This is why the military has rarely used it in internal operations for a long time. The reason for the special ammunition point: it is worth mentioning that as Xia Bai has completely taken root, there are far fewer intelligent zombies in the Anyang Mountain area, but Xia Bai does not dare to take it lightly. For intelligent zombies, his scale is not large and there is no way. Survivor bases where the established military is stationed are often the best targets. Therefore, the more honest the intelligent zombies are, the more vigilant Xia Bai is. A very strict review was carried out to prevent any intelligent zombies from getting in. The Anyang Mountain survivor base is in stable operation and making rapid progress. On March 27, 2019, news came from Alpha that the traceability of some modules of the alien system has been completed. This means that Zhao Ziglo's hard days in Anyang Mountain are finally over. Please subscribe for genuine subscription. Thanks to Bookfriend 160,916,200,631,272 for the support of 10,000 rewards. The third update. There will be more later. Chapter 198. I also want to study it. Chapter 200. I also want to study it. Fourth update. The number of other modules that the alien error reporting module can locate is limited. Xia Bai spent several days with the battleship and Alpha and was able to locate only 5. According to the modeling of Alpha within the battleship, these 5 modules are divided in various locations across the globe. There is even one under the deep ocean. It is not easy to find these things. To get more information at this point, this thing has been fully used for Xia Bai, and it is time to hand this thing over to the military. Zhao Ziglo was very angry the day he was released. Although he had been treating Xia Bai with delicious food and drinks here, he was actually under house arrest, and he thought that when he came here, he originally planned to give Xia Bai delicious food and drinks. Bai showed off his power and asked the other party to be honest, but he didn't expect that he was deceived by the other party. He was put under house arrest here for several days. Although Zhao Ziglo was a little depressed, he also calmed down. The mountains here are high and far away, and it is a special period now. Although he said it arrogantly, he also knew that, unless Xia Bai did something really extraordinary, it is impossible for the military to send people to deal with Xia Bai, just because Zhao Ziglo said something bad about himself. In the current situation, the real trend is to unite all human beings. To send troops to deal with people for such a trivial matter is even more serious. Impossible. After such a long time, Zhao Ziglo actually realized that Xia Bai must have realized the attitude of Changbei Mountain early, and then he dared to go against him. However, hasn't this kid never been to the Changbei Mountain survivor base? Zhao Ziglo was very depressed. After being released by Xia Bai personally handed over the number 1 item. He also looked very depressed. However, this depression was soon diluted by another incident. Although Xia Bai had this guy under house arrest for a long time, he was still very polite in appearance. Although these people in the sub-government were serious bureaucrats, they were also people who did things. Sometimes, the two did not conflict. Therefore, he even came to see Zhao Ziglo off in person that day, with a smile on his face, claiming that he would send Zhao Ziglo to the helicopter and watch them go away. Zhao Ziglo was not very happy at first, but Xia Bai finally handed over the east and west. This time he was still able to deliver the goods when he returned. Moreover, when boarding the plane, he unexpectedly found that there were 2 people missing from his team. Zhao Ziglo discovered that Zuyiman and Mahangbo were not there. He squinted his eyes and looked around, but he didn't see these 2 people around. Seeing that the helicopter was about to take off, if these 2 people didn't come, would they not leave? Zhao Ziglo glanced at Xia Bai beside him, thought for a moment, and said, "Where are Miss Zhu and Mahanbo?" When this old guy calls Zhu Yiman, he is Miss Zhu, and when he talks about Mahanbo, he calls him by his first name. Xia Bai glanced at this guy, smiled, and said, "They like my place very much, and want to stay here for a few more days." Zigo is also a veteran. He couldn't hear the implication of Xia Bai's words. When the fat guy heard this, he immediately said F***ck in his heart. He thought that Xia Bai was brave enough by keeping him under house arrest for these days, but he didn't expect it. In the end, 2 people were detained. Those 2 people were even more unlucky than him. Zigo opened his mouth, glanced at Xia Bai who was smiling, and said, "These 2 people are not ordinary people. Miss Zhu alone is the daughter of the Zhu group's socialite." Xia Bai nodded and said, "I know this well. The Zhu group, the Scientific Research Center, and the 13 Kings, if they take the initiative to stay here, I can't let them leave, right?" Zigo licked his slightly dry lips, remained silent for a moment, stared at Xia Bai in front of him, and thought to himself, "You are so courageous." Only then did he finally realize that the smiling Xia Bai standing in front of him was exactly like a mountain king and a bandit. When he didn't want to reason with you, there was no point in trying to reason with him. Zigo swallowed, thinking that the relationship between him and the Zhu group's Scientific Research Center was not that good. He had just said a word of help, which was considered acceptable. Now stop talking nonsense. It would be fun if he offended the bandit in front of him and asked him to stay. Therefore, Zigo said directly, "In that case, let them go. They are all young people. They will not be able to stay idle in the apocalypse. Anyang Mountain is indeed a treasure land. I'm old and still have a mission on my body. I must just hurry up and take this thing back, so I won't bother you too much." Zigo felt really weak now, and he no longer spoke arrogantly. He was much more polite. Xia Bai also smiled and glanced at the number 1 target who was being slowly loaded onto the helicopter by 2 soldiers. After thinking about it, he said seriously, "Deputy Director Zhao, please go back and bring me a message. This thing, it's a time bomb. Be careful." Zigo looked at the expression on Xia Bai's face, straightened his expression, and said, "I understand this, don't worry." Although he is a highly bureaucratic person who is obsessed with eating, drinking and having fun, he is not a puss. He has a serious attitude towards dealing with business matters, and there is another way to deal with matters such as intrigues, and he can tell the difference very clearly. If not, he would not be a deputy director in the apocalypse, nor would he appear in any young mountain. The more we reach the end of the world, the more capable people in the former government agencies and military agencies, such as Zigo, who are neither high nor low, will be able to stand. Zigo thought for a while and said, "There is one thing, if I don't ask you now, someone will ask you in the future, although I don't know what this thing behind me is. But you kept this thing for so many days. What is it for?" Xia Bai smiled. "I also want to study it." Xia Bai's words were ambiguous, but the answer itself was credible, but it did not reveal any information. For example, what did he research and fail to discover? However, before Xia Bai handed over the alien module, he asked Alpha to restore it to its original state. Xia Bai did not want to share his results with the military. The military's capabilities were not weaker than his own. The information Baineng can get from this will be obtained by the military sooner or later. Without Alpha, it may be difficult for them to locate other modules, but most of the information will not go wrong, let alone make any mistakes. Alien stupidity. The military is not that stupid. Thanks to Book Friendless Father for his support of 10,000 rewards. Hey, thanks to Book Friendless Unspent 10,000 rewards, another whole master of this book was born. More and more. Chapter 199 I'm not leaving. Chapter 201 I'm not leaving. Update 5. Since the military can obtain the basic information on this alien module through its own channels, Xia Bai has no need to talk too much and reveal what he knows. And in that case, how he did it is unclear. It's hard to explain. Point in Xia Bai's view, warships can appear at will, and once people see and understand their uniqueness, it actually doesn't matter. However, it is better not to leak the important information, resources, etc. inside the battleship. Point Xia Bai himself is not the kind of flamboyant character, and the current level 4 battleships are not yet ready to show off. Point as for detaining Zuyuman and Mahangbo, Xia Bai also had his own considerations. But the relationship was quite subtle, and Xia Bai had to be careful to control it. Point in the future, he will use the military to intervene in the Changbai Mountain survivor base, and he will also use the zoo group and the scientific research center as a breakthrough. Although Xia Bai has already cooperated with the military, there is no way that people from Li Jianbei's group will let Xia Bai drive a warship in Changbai Mountain. Fire inside. Point of course, it is not the time to talk about these now. The most critical thing is to seize the time to upgrade the battleship to level 5. Zhao Ziguo quickly boarded the plane, took off in the helicopter, and soon disappeared at the end of the sky. Advanced extreme mutants in coastal areas have been intercepted by the military. Those flying giant monsters are almost impossible to see inland, and zombies have no ability to fly. Therefore, among the 3 northeastern provinces, air is still the safest. One of the popular channels, no matter how ferocious the zombies are, they can't reach the sky. Of course, there's nothing you can do about taking things flying in the sky. If anyone has a floating city in the last days that can both float and farm, it will definitely be a treasure land. After seeing off Zhao Ziguo, Xia Bai turned around and looked at Liu Bei, who was standing behind him, and said, "I said, they are all gone. How about I give you a car and you go back to Changbai Mountain?" Yes, Zhao Ziguo left, and target number 1 was also taken away, but Liu Bei and the others did not leave, and Xia Bai didn't know why. Liu Bei said, "I know that the current situation in Anyang Mountain is not optimistic. Even cars are scarce resources. If we drive away a car, it is equivalent to taking away an important material of yours. We are soldiers, and cannot do this. So, we better not leave, just stay here, and we can also help Anyang Mountain, which is under construction." When Xia Bai heard this, he couldn't help but open his mouth, but he didn't expect that he shot himself in the foot. Wasn't it Xia Bai himself who said before that Anyang was poor without a car? But the expression on Liu Bei's face did not remain tense for too long. The serious soldier raised the corners of his mouth slightly, showing a rare smile, and said, "I'm kidding. We received the latest order from our superiors, asking us to stay Anyang Mountain, assist you in local defense and construction." When she said this, she took a breath and said, "From now on, let's cooperate with each other, and we won't have to work hard anymore. Moreover, nominally speaking, our establishment is temporarily incorporated into Anyang Mountain, and is under your jurisdiction. You can assign us any tasks that require us, no matter whether it is dangerous or not. We will never hesitate." Xia Bai glanced at her. To be honest, the people in the military were still very reliable, but he realized that these were the people placed on his side by Li Jianbei. Although Li Jianbei said before that he would not assign military personnel to Xia Bai and would only provide assistance when Xia Bai needed it, Li Jianbei's side could not really rest assured after all, and this time, Xia Bai he had taken the initiative to detain the alien module for such a long time. Although everyone's faces were friendly and Xia Bai finally handed over the things, anyone else would have to think more deeply and let Liu Bei go along with the flow. It is normal for this group of people to stay here. Of course, Liu Bei also knew the true meaning of staying here, but she was also a soldier. Looking at Xia Bai was on the one hand, she also hoped to do something for this emerging survivor base, and she had been in Anyang these days. Shan also saw the development and vitality here under Xia Bai's jurisdiction, which was even incomparable to the Changbai Mountain survivor base with complex forces. The military built survivor base has its benefits, but of course it also has its inevitable disadvantages. The same is of course true for the survivor base built by the survivors themselves. In Liu Bei's view, Xia Bai may be a bit rogue, but he really wants to build a real survivor base where people can survive. In this case, although Liu Bei came to watch Xia Bai, he was also willing to contribute. Xia Bai is actually not a bad person. When he was in Bincheng, it was clear that Xia Bai had already obtained the number 1 target, but he still took a huge risk and used that strange traction device to rescue them all. This point, Xia Bai always kept it in mind. Xia Bai and Xia Bai briefly chatted for a few words, but didn't say anything more. He hoped that the Liming team would join the Anyang Mountain Guard team, so that they could help him train those ordinary people, so that the ordinary survivors could help them as soon as possible. In the past 6 months, the survival skills acquired in the apocalypse are transformed into real combat capabilities and qualities. From this aspect, Xia Bai and the others staying will actually be a benefit to Anyang Mountain in the long run. Moreover, although Xia Bai came to look after Xia Bai really didn't have anything shady here, so there was almost no restriction on him. But on this day, the matter finally came to an end. The source of Xia Bai's missile attack in Bincheng was still not found. The source of the missile launch from the military side was confirmed to be a member of Anki sect. Xia Bai had hardly heard of this name, but according to what he knew now, that person from Anki's faction seemed to be a big force in the military. He was a young faction that rose up after the apocalypse, and was the same as Li Jianbei and Yang factions such as Wenshan, who were important officials before the end of the world, vigorously resisted each other, and the internal struggle was extremely serious. Anki's faction has even attracted the support of the former Ice City Mutual Rescue Association, the largest force among survivors in Changbei Mountain. Now it is considered to be in full swing among the survivors in Changbei Mountain. The momentum is strong, but those 5 attacks are towards the missiles of Xia Bai's battleship also came from Anki's Heng's group. This information was obtained from Li Jianbei. Moreover, Li Jianbei told Xia Bai that he also had people on his side who were in contact with Anki's Heng, but Xia Bai still needed to investigate who they were. Of course, Xia Bai was very concerned about this, and he conducted investigations secretly. Thanks to book friends Vi and ZHU Fan for the great reward. Let's have dinner. There will be more later. Chapter 200 Coastal Defense Line. Chapter 202 Coastal Defense Line, Update 6. However, it is not easy for Xia Bai to find people on his side. It has not even been a month since the Anyang Mountain Survivor Base was established. It seems that they have gathered together, but in fact they are still in a state of scattered sand. Xia Bai holds the strongest force, and is the number 1 person in Anyang Mountain who can't shake the right to speak, but he is still a little troublesome about these trivial matters. Therefore, although Xia Bai had already started investigating, and even used Alpha to retrieve the previous situation, there was not much progress, because Xia Bai was not on Anyang Mountain at the time. The various data retrieved afterwards and other people questioned, it's also hard to get exact and precise information. Of course, Xia Bai will not give up on this matter. This is a time bomb. He will find out the other party sooner or later. It doesn't matter if he can't catch it now. It will take a long time and the other party will show up. Apart from this, Xia Bai restarted his leveling career. After all, upgrading the 5th level battleship is the most critical thing. Although Xia Bai has located the locations of several other alien modules, he has no intention of taking action immediately, because the nearest one is on the southern coast of China. Xia Bai is in the north of China, and it is still very far away to go to the south. According to Xia Bai's plan, he would not leave the 3 eastern provinces until the battleship reached level 5. At this moment, it was only March of the 2nd year of the apocalypse. There were still 3 years before the arrival of alien creatures, so there was no time point. If he doesn't improve the strength of the battleship, even if he finds other modules, it will be meaningless. Alien creatures must come, so getting the system modules they put on the Earth can at most deepen our understanding of these alien creatures or figure out what they want to do on the Earth. But if there is no real hard power, even if you know this, it doesn't make any sense. Therefore, Zhao Ziglo and others were sent away, and Xia Bai began his leveling career. He also thought about the huge benefits that the extreme mutants spawned by the mutated viruses in the coastal areas could provide him, so he immediately went to the coastal areas. But after he passed by, using the battleship's technical invisibility to slow down the speed of the battleship, and observing silently in the sky, he realized that there was no room for him to intervene here, and it would be difficult to level up here, because the military has deployed a large number of fire defense lines along the entire coastline. Where there are cities, they use the cities as their strongholds. Where there are no cities, the military easily builds well-formed fortifications. Their guns rush towards the coastline in unison, and small groups of extreme mutants log in from under the coastline. They were directly strangled, and a large number of extreme mutants swarmed in, and various heavy artillery and fighter planes came, mainly incendiary bombs and high explosive bombs, bombing the entire area, including some loose beach areas, and even the entire ground was blown apart. Seawater poured in, and the ground was full of holes in the inland environment. The military rarely uses special ammunition on such a large scale. Even if it is used, it is only a small-scale firepower of some troops. Although it is the end of the world, it will not benefit anyone to blow up the ecological environment into a mess, because the inland is full of zombies, and no one can use special ammunition to carry out continent-wide bombing, so it is better not to use it. The military's operations here are very orderly. There are all kinds of strange monsters climbing up from the coastline. Most of them are marine creatures. After mutation, their sizes are obviously much larger than those on land. The conditions of the creatures are also very strange. But the military's defense line has been stabilized. No matter how many of these creatures are killed, they can be intercepted and shot by the military immediately. The military has invested a lot of manpower and troops here. The military forces along the entire coastal area, like a multifaceted fort. Neither the extreme mutants externally nor the zombies inland can shake them. Unless it is something like a rambler, it is difficult for any creature to be able to break through the military's line of defense. It is precisely because of the existence of this line of defense that the most common zombies people see in the inland are ordinary zombies. Once these creatures in the ocean come ashore, they will spread the mutant viruses they carry on a large scale. The entire inland area will become a place like Bincheng. The number of extreme mutants will exceed that of ordinary zombies, and the human living environment will become worse. But equally, it is precisely because of the existence of this line of defense that the military's operations in the interior have become difficult and stretched. Xia Bai silently observed a circle in the sky and finally gave up the plan of leveling up in this area. The military's defense line here was stable. If he stepped in randomly, he might cause some trouble. He respects the soldiers and is not willing to cause trouble to them at this time. Xia Bai planned to return to the Shengjing city area on the Anyang mountainside to hunt zombies. Although ordinary zombies could not contribute many energy points to the battleship, there was an advantage in hunting the zombies in the Shengjing area. The fewer zombies there are in Shengjing, the less pressure Anyang Mountain will face from the zombie tide, and it will be safer for survivors on Anyang Mountain to enter the city in search of supplies. Xia Bai returned from the coastline and caught up with Anyang Mountain, accepting a new batch of survivors. There were probably more than 200 people who were moving into Anyang Mountain in an orderly manner under the management of Huang Qiulan and others. Although the location of Anyang Mountain is not very safe, and may not even be as safe as Langjiang province at the end of the three eastern provinces, there are many survivors here. It is backed by the Kyoto area, and is blocked by the Changbei Mountain survivor base in front. With the cooperation of the military propaganda, with the passage of time, Xia Bai, the survivor base, has gathered more and more survivors, and the scale is getting bigger every day. As for this group of new survivors, Xia Bai just glanced at them from the sky, then drove his battleship and passed through the sky at high speed. The new survivors below, listening to the huge buzzing sound in the sky, all raised their heads one by one, looking up to the sky with some surprise. After discovering the battleship, they all showed incredible expressions, and their eyes followed it all the way. The battleship disappeared at the other end of Anyang Mountain. However, despite being surprised, these survivors felt more of a sense of security. Of course, Xia Bai's passing was intentional. When he landed in the back mountain, he received a message from Yang Xin. There is someone over there in Changbei Mountain who wants to see you. Thanks to book friend Chungwa 2002 for supporting me with 10,000 prizes. This book has another author. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.